all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast. We made it. We're at episode 10, boys. We're a real podcast. It's me, your host, Dean, here joined by my co-host, the man with the plan, David. David, how the fuck you doing?
Double digits, dude. We gotta feel good about that.
We're real.
It's never gonna be the same again.
We went through all the technical difficulties before this. It's gonna be great. Soon we'll be bigger than the Joe Rogan podcast. It's gonna be huge.
Yeah, we're actually thinking about renaming this the Double Feature Experience.
It's gonna be cool. We'll have Joe Rogan on. We'll talk about like fighting movies. It'll be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So, what movies are we watching this week?
Oh, this week we got a really good mix from one of my favorites, Terry Gilliam. We're gonna be watching Time Bandits and 12 Monkeys. Let's dive into those log lines, everybody. An imaginative latchkey kid follows a troupe of time-traveling thieves through time as they seek out riches and debauchery. And a deranged prisoner travels into the past to recover intel on a twisted trust fund kid who will bring about the apocalypse.
You would think these movies would be incredibly different, but it's Terry Gilliam, so they're, only kind of different.
I don't know. I think there's some clear differences here that we're gonna find, but it's very obvious based on the point at which in his career he made both of these movies.
Yeah. All right, so where do you want to start first?
Well, why don't we start with the one that goes further back into the past, Time Bandits.
This is true. Time Bandits came out in 1981. This was actually one of Terry Gilliam's first movies. And this is one that's near and dear to my heart. This was the movie that my dad used to show, like, me and my brother and, like, my sister when we were kids. This was, like, the dad didn't want to, like, babysit, so he put on a movie kind of movies. Because it's really long. And, me and my brother, we loved it, so.
Yeah, I mean,
have you ever seen this before?
I haven't. This is probably as close as he gets to making a children's movie, but though it still has like elements of, like his Python tenure in there. It very much feels like if it wasn't for the fact that some players were just in here as cameos, that this could have been a Python movie. But instead, it's kind of got this lens of capitalizing on that like early 80s, kind of late 70s, like VHS children's boom.
Yeah, well, I don't know that, like, because this was 81 when this came out, so VHS was kind of becoming a thing.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Yeah, but I mean, like, this was one of those like weird things, because is this the only movie you can qualify as a kids movie from Terry Gilliam?
Well,
It's the only one I can think of.
I'm running through his I'm running through his filmography here, and well, The Fisher King's not a kids movie. Brazil is definitely not a kids movie.
It's not a kids movie. I watched that last week.
I don't think Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas has anything below a PG-13 rating. I doubt it would be PG.
God, no.
None of the Python stuff is for kids. That's for damn sure. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is really about as close as you can get.
Yeah, like, out of his entire filmography, it's like this, and I guess Baron Munchausen.
Yeah, it gets there, but maybe it's still. I wouldn't say a kid would be as interested in that movie as this one.
Yeah, like, but yeah, so that's kind of weird when you think about it. This guy's his whole shtick is that he's big, bombastic, like fantasy, weird kids, whimsical kind of stuff, just transposed to this really like surrealist kind of lens. Is that a good way to describe his like his oeuvre, his auteur ideology here?
I think
Because he's an
surrealist.
auteur.
Yeah, definitely. And surrealist is a really good way to describe it because I'm familiar with Gilliam because of Python. I'm a huge fan of the television show and the
Oh yeah.
movies that follow. I got a copy of Holy Grail, like a production script of it, one of my prized possessions. And his experience there was as an animator. He did all the like paper mache cutaways that they would do,
Mhm.
and those were super surreal. They were definitely always based in nonsense and cutting things out and putting them together to see what happens. And I kind of feel like that's what not necessarily his filmmaking at all is, because he ends up actually making a really good career out of his directing career. But he definitely, I think, when he's writing these movies or coming up with the stories, takes a similar approach of like throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks and then shoving it in your mouth and eating it for dinner.
Yeah. So that's like so for those watching or listening or whatever, that's kind of the experience you're gonna get out of these Terry Gilliam movies. And the reason we're going so deep on that in Time Bandits is because this is one of his most like weirder kind of movies, I guess. Just like how the story goes, because the plot's kind of out there. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about the plot.
Right.
So yeah, so the movie starts with our main character. It's this little English kid. Sorry, I'm trying to remember his name because this actor doesn't like. He does he have negative charisma?
Well, I think we were kind of touching on it a little earlier in our preliminary discussion that he seems more like a vehicle than an actual character.
Yeah, he's just this. Okay, the kid's name is Kevin, but he's just this kid that's like, he's in the movie, so people watching the movie can just kind of follow along, but he's not like very interesting. He's just he a great way to describe him, like in the log lines, he's this latchkey kid who's just kind of ignored by his parents, and his parents are like really into like that consumerism, like early 80s culture and like Thatcher England, all that stuff. But this movie is like kind of set in the future, but it's not set in the future.
I
It's
would
weird.
say it's probably set contemporarily. It just seems a little, like you said, that surrealism makes it seem like it's not quite meant to be, well, real for that matter.
Mhm.
His parents are very obsessed with their appliances and things like people were at the time, and especially because it's set in England proper, which I find interesting, even though Gilliam, I mean, I'm sure Gilliam spent a lot of time there, but he's an American. Um,
Yeah, people don't know that yet. Terry Gilliam, he was born in like Wisconsin.
yeah,
He's born and raised American. He
but
moved to England for Monty Python and stuff like that.
right, and it's like I don't know why he would. Maybe I could see this being a movie that's set in like small farm town America to make, because I definitely feel like the that Kevin is supposed to be a vehicle for Gilliam himself as a child. I mean, he's such an imaginative guy. Of course, he's making a story about an imaginative kid, and who else would that be about? But
Oh yeah, and Kevin really seems like a director's surrogate kind of thing, because we're saying he has like negative charisma and like he's just a vehicle, but he does have character.
yeah, I think a good word to describe it is he seems monotone, and not like in the
Yeah.
traditional sense where he's like constantly flat and boring, but like it seems like he only has one tone to play by.
Mm.
Yeah,
Granted, our boy Kevin, he's this weird like imaginative kid. He's really into history, ancient Rome, all that stuff, and his parents don't really care. The parents are doing like the bare minimum to like be parents for him.
Mhm.
And one night he goes to bed and he hears this strange rumbling in his closet, and out jumps a fucking knight, like suit of armor, like gonna go kill the Normans in on the moors, and just bursts out of his closet, runs through his wall, and it's this giant like scenery scape of like 15th century England. And then Kevin freaks out, covers up, and then when he looks back, it's all gone. So he plans to like bring his camera and like take pictures of everything to make sure that when he sees this the next night, he has evidence. But oddly enough, a knight doesn't come through the wind or the door on the next night over. David, who comes out of Kevin's closet?
Oh, just the Time Bandits, as we'll continue to call them. The Time Bandits, consisting of, I think, is the term that we have respectfully agreed upon, is little people. Six of them, I think, is correct.
Six. It was supposed to be seven, but Disney would have sued.
Yeah.
That's not even a joke.
Oh,
That's not even a joke.
zing. I mean,
Boom.
yeah, so six little people come clamoring out of the closet, and they are the Time Bandits. They are led, if I can get the name correct here, because I switched over to another movie that this little kid Kevin had done.
Oh yeah.
David
The main
Rappaport.
yeah, David Rappaport, he's the main time bandit you're gonna really need to know about. He plays Randall, he's the leader, and also he does a great job
Yeah,
in the
all these
movie.
guys are they're really fun. They all do like really imaginative, creative jobs with their roles. They're very um, an energetic troupe, and they definitely are really good at playing an adventurous role, I think.
Oh yeah. Honestly, the time bandits are what makes this movie fun.
Oh yeah,
Uh that, and once we get to like the shenanigans when they start going back in time, it gets really nice. But that's the thing is, if you're watching this movie, you're watching it to see like the time bandits and their shtick, because they're in a different movie like than Kevin is. Kevin's in this like wonderful, like whimsical, like what's going on? I'm all over the place. And the time bandits are in like some sort of like heist comedy. They're
yeah.
like in Ocean's 11.
It definitely seems like Kevin is just following them around. I mean, that's literally the inciting incident to the story. Is after they come clamoring through the closet, the wall starts to like move in on itself into this magical pathway to nowhere, and they all obviously go along their way because that's apparently what they've been following. And then Kevin is like curious about it, like, oh, what is this? And then the fucking face of God all of a
The
sudden
the
manifests behind him.
face of Doom Jesus appears from the sky and starts chasing them.
Genuinely terrifying, I think.
Oh yeah, the best kids movies have nightmare fuel in them. Let's be honest here.
Oh yeah.
Willy Wonka, Secret of Nim, the list goes on.
Oh yeah.
But
And that's yeah, but like yeah, that's the impetus of the movie, is that Kevin literally just like wanders into the hallway, not even like, well, I want to go on an adventure. It's kind of by accident, which is interesting.
yeah,
We keep saying that Kevin is a vehicle, and I'm going to continue to point out places where I wish I would have seen him choose to do something rather than just fall into it. Because
mm,
okay, no big spoilers, because again, this is a 40-year-old movie, and if you were watching the podcast, then presumably you'd be watching along with us. We all know that this is going to end up being a dream, and I get it. Dreams are supposed.
hey, there's some stuff at the end of this movie that would beg to differ.
Well,
We got
that's true.
into an argument
That's
about
true.
this last time.
Apparently, Terry Gilliam is a,
Insane person.
a lucid dreaming truther. But
It happens.
basically, it's like this is one instance where I would have been like, I get it. It's a dream. You're kind of pulled along in a dream, and I can get how, if that's the choice Gilliam was making, this movie makes a lot more sense. But I still would have liked Kevin to be like, I want to go on an adventure, and then run down the hall, and the time bandits have to chase him, and then maybe it would be a little bit of a different movie. But maybe we might get the time bandits are trying to like mentor Kevin in some sort of way.
Yeah, because in this movie, it's like Kevin is trying to like be the responsible one in the troop with the Time Bandits, because the Time Bandits are the most irresponsible like people to like be taking care of an 11-year-old.
Oh yeah.
And I think the other way, where it's the Time Bandits are trying to take care of this 11-year-old kid and kind of bring him into the fold, that would have just made a whole different movie. But I don't know which is more interesting. I think the how the movie is now,
It's
it's
perfectly
it's
fine.
it's fine. Yeah, I mean, if you're going the other way, being a different movie,
Yeah, because
but
this is also
we
like a couple adults commenting on the plot of a kids movie, so it's like, you
exactly.
know, on top of the fact we're commenting on one of the most successful directors to ever live, so it's like, what point
Well,
are
you
there?
know,
But as we continue on, where do they
w-
land, Dean?
well, they land in Italy being invaded by Napoleon Bonaparte during his like reign down in, or during his like conquering of Italy, and it is the weirdest thing you will ever see, is seeing Napoleon be laughing at some marionette puppets or hand puppets and then shooting the puppeteer because he made a height joke.
Yeah,
Ah,
Gilliam is a history nerd, definitely. I mean, Python shows that in other movie. I mean, the entire Python movie series definitely shows that. And he gets to have his fun with this movie in that way because he plays on the Napoleon Bonaparte short joke that everybody always says, how he has like short man syndrome. And obviously, he's entertained by the people who are shorter than him, who can dance around and sing for him, makes him feel like a big guy. So the Time Bandits do a little song and dance that amuses him, and he welcomes them for dinner and drinks.
well, first he promotes all of them to his generals for the night.
Oh, that is true. That is true. Always employ the
Because
men that are shorter than you.
exactly, you want to be the tallest guy in the room. That's Napoleon's strategy.
Now he's got to fire a lot of people then.
Yeah,
um,
it's true.
so Napoleon obviously gets drunk off his ass.
Oh, this just destroys himself. This
He's
guy is polishing
lit
off
like a candle.
bottles and bottles of wine are going down this guy's throat. Oh,
Yeah.
we almost forgot. So this movie also has another thing where there's a bunch of cameos in this movie. One of them being Napoleon. He's played by Sir Ian Holm. Is he knighted?
Good
I'm
question.
pretty sure he is.
Uh, I have him listed
Yep.
here as just Ian Holm, but
Oh no, he's
yeah,
he
Sir
was
Ian Holm.
knighted, but he was knighted after Time Bandits. He was knighted after the Lord of the Rings films. But yeah,
Well,
so Bilbo Baggins is playing Napoleon.
wonderful.
May it rest in peace. And so he's playing Napoleon. And do you like the portrayal of Napoleon in this film? Because I love it. I think he's like the funniest character,
Yeah,
like
I
the
think it's
funniest like
fine.
cameo.
I think it's fine. It's like there's a level to which any of these characters, besides one that will be named later, well, maybe a couple even, but there's a simplicity placed upon them so as to not make anything overcomplicated, which was kind of nice because it made everything super easy to get and follow, and you never feel like you kind of get lost in like the complicated history of things. But
Yeah,
yeah, no, this was a good scene, especially because the bandits steal the show literally when they use the opportunity to steal the jewelry directly off his hand and everything else in the room.
it's true. These bandits rob him completely blind, and I believe it's around this part of the movie that we discover how the Time Bandits are able to jump through time and being able to actually do this. So how the Time Bandits go through time is they have this map, and it's this one. It's a really cool looking. It's like this big cloth map. It's I don't know, size like a movie poster, and it shows through. It's like, because this is where we get into the weird like theological thing about the movie. So
Yeah,
in this movie, God created the universe, but he only had 7 days to do it. So he did kind of a slapdash job making it,
yeah,
and he delegated it, or some of the makings of the universe, to the Time Bandits. The Time Bandits were in charge of like making trees and bushes and rocks and stuff like that. They were in charge of like the really basic little things.
Yeah, it's
And
like
God was doing the broad strokes, humanity, good, evil, that sort of stuff.
yeah, it's Gilliam's way of poking fun at bureaucracies, another kind of thing that he does in a lot of his work.
Yeah. And this map, what it shows is all the holes where God was like, we'll just slap this over here through the hole of creation. And these are the little holes that you're able to jump through to pop you out on a different point on the map, kind of thing. They open up at specific points in history and you're able to go through. It's just where God kind of, or the supreme being, I think is what they call him. But yeah,
Yeah,
the supreme being where he didn't do a good enough job stitching up the fabric of the universe. And with that, that's how they figure out that a thing that one of the portals is going to open, that they jump through, and this leads them from Napoleon's conquest in Italy to England during the time
it's
of,
like medieval England.
yeah, medieval England, where they come across Shelley Duvall and is it John Cleese?
No, that's actually
That's Robin Hood.
Michael
Oh,
Palin.
yes, they come into Shelley Duvall and Michael Palin playing Vincent and Pansy, who are having some sort of interesting discussion.
It's like if you were to view a Cialis commercial in 1352 or something like this.
Yeah, I need to know what that's the deleted scene. I want the whole conversation of that carriage ride.
Yeah, or even just like, how do these two people meet? What is
Yeah,
their? Because they will come back, and what is their?
their
What is the
deal,
sick game that God is playing with them? Or specifically on Vincent, who seems to have a lot of,
issues.
if we were to go back to that Cialis commercial, there would be some sort of deflated ball going on, or some sort of carrot that is a little bit too soggy. Uh,
There's some dick jokes in this movie,
yeah,
and
it's
they're
it's
great.
very fun. I think this is probably my favorite cameo because of this, because I like Michael Palin anyway. Like, he was one of
Mhm.
my favorite Pythons because of how he can get very joyous. Um, like, he could just like pop like that really well,
Yeah,
and I think he that's one of his strengths, and it kind of comes out here in like this sexual tension they have between them, where it really feels like he's a dog chained to a tree.
yeah. Th- Honestly, it's almost worth it if you go on YouTube and you just find this scene. It'll probably get a laugh out of you even now. It's
Oh
pretty good.
yeah, it's hilarious.
But yeah, so the Time Bandits go in, they crash the carriage literally, but they're so overjoyed because they just robbed Napoleon of all of his riches. There's like gold plates, there's jewelry, the Mona Lisa's in there, a golden hand from Napoleon. They're overjoyed. And then they're trekking through the forest, getting ready for their next big heist, where they come across who else but Robin Hood and his merry band of thugs. Cause yeah, and I think this is a commentary on socialism,
Yeah, so
but yeah,
this is another really good cameo because, again, love John Cleese, and John Cleese, I think I've mentioned this before, but he has this tendency to play like very subtle and then all of a sudden pop angry or pop
yeah,
rageful. And here it's all like this kind of, uh
just
he Robin Hood
super,
seems super
yeah,
vacant almost.
yeah. Like when so honestly, John Cleese is just like the greatest Robin Hood in cinema history. In this like 5 minutes he's on screen, it's so good
Yeah, it
because
feels like he got like a microdose of heroin and then decided to steal from the rich and give to the poor.
yes, because the time it's like, look at all this treasure we got. It's like, oh, that's lovely. The poor will love all this treasure, and then they're just like, wait, the poor, and they start giving the treasure to the poor. But every time they give a piece of treasure, another guy punches out the poor person that just got a piece of treasure. And Robin Hood's like, why are you doing that? And he's like, well, we just got to, keep order. And then he's like, oh, well, okay, then just gives another thing. You have a good day. Boom, right in the kisser. Next.
Yeah,
That's a commentary on something, right?
I think
That's
it's
not just shtick.
for me. What I think it is actually, after you just explaining it, I kind of like just clicked with me, which is I think in itself a micro commentary on David's brain and how slow it moves. But um, for me, it's like I kind of get this. It's like just a joke about like absolute power corrupts absolutely, and how if a poor person gets any glimpse of riches and power, they're gonna take it and run with it because there's like a stray dog desperation that poverty gives you. I mean,
I
having kind of come from that once, it's certainly not easy to just sit down and be like, yeah, I guess I do need to save and keep all my budget in order. I mean, if you can go out and buy that pair of J's after selling off a gold chalice, buy that pair of J's, bro.
David, so how's them new pair of J's treating you right now?
Well, I've maxed out 5 credit cards.
You had to
So,
get the collector's edition. That was your fault.
please go review to our sponsor link today. I really need money.
You can find us on Patreon once we figure out how to set that up.
Yeah, once I
So,
figure out how to get away from the debt collectors.
it's true. So, the Time Bandits disenfranchised that Robin Hood just straight up robbed them and gave away all their riches to the poor. There's like a whole other thing where the Time Bandits are arguing with each other because they can't rob back the goods from Robin Hood because it's him and his merry band of thugs of like 50 dudes.
Yeah.
So they're all bickering. Kevin's like, oh, what is this? Blah, blah, blah. And also throughout this, Kevin's taking pictures of everything. He takes pictures of Robin Hood, takes pictures of the Time Bandits, of the map. So he's just kind of like being a vacant tourist, just kind of taking pictures of everything. And this is when the Doom Face of God shows up again.
Oh, lovely.
Yes, our favorite cameo in the movie. And around this time, they're just like, okay, Kevin, cheese it. They're all running away. And then Kevin comes up to 2 portals. One's supposed to go somewhere, and the other one leads to somewhere else, goes through that one. And he literally falls upon Sean Connery fighting the Minotaur in ancient Greece. He's supposed to be King Agamemnon, but it is just Sean Connery, because I don't know if King Agamemnon had a Scottish accent.
Yeah, Sean Connery has never been one to give up that accent, and he certainly does not do it here. Though I think we've also talked about this before. We kind of feel like he seems like he's having a lot of fun doing this
Oh,
role.
yeah.
So we kind of feel like this was a movie where he was like, yeah, I don't want to do this normal shit I want to do. I want to just be a Greek king in a comedy for once.
He
I'll take the hit for this one.
he actually did this movie for free, I believe.
Oh, really?
Either for free or like way under cost for like Sean Connery. Because this Sean Connery in 1981, he was like superstar power. But he wanted to work with Terry Gilliam. He thought the script was great, and he wanted to play King Agamemnon because he thought that was a really cool character. And
I
he was
mean,
like, he's like, it was either I'll do it for free and you just pay me from the gross and we'll agree upon that, or he'll do it for like at cost and you'll just pay him the rest off the gross or something like that. It was also a good way because that's how Terry Gilliam negotiated a lot of these cameos to be so cheap. Because he was like, "Yo, I got Sean Connery to do this for like $6.50 and a ham sandwich. You're asking for 10 mil? What's wrong with you, man? Jesus Christ."
yeah, it's kind of, I mean, not in that, and it gives this movie like ungodly star power out of nowhere, just
Oh
buried in the
yeah,
middle of the movie. And to me, it's also one of those things where I feel like no other actor and no other actor that's actually cast in this film could have done this part the same way, because it's not even like he plays King Agamemnon great. It's that Sean Connery playing King Agamemnon is specifically too good to pass up.
it is so strange because so we're gonna stick on this part of the movie and his like portrayal of King Agamemnon because he is everything a good king and a good father should be, in like the 10 minutes he's on screen. And he is just nailing it. Cause he's kind, he's like super good to Kevin, he's like funny, he's Sean Connery, so he has charisma coming out of his ass.
Yeah.
And he's just exuding this like warm, like wholesome presence around him. And he's in a fucking toga.
And he also has this particular fascination with magic tricks for some reason. But,
Yeah. Apparently that was a thing that Sean Connery wanted to do on set. He did it to entertain like the Kevin kid or the actor when they were like at like catering or whatever. And then Terry Gilliam was like, dude, that's perfect. Put it in the movie. And that's why King Agamemnon is really into magic.
what was it they putting in Sean Connery's coffee around this time? Like, was he just riding high on living life? Like, what's
I
good with him?
I don't know, but apparently Sean Connery's just he was living his greatest life for like 40 years. All
Yeah, I
right.
mean, like, I think it was SNL that always joked about him being like one of the most happy-go-lucky people ever. So I'm not
Yep.
surprised, but
Screw
well,
you, Trebek.
big ups to Sean Connery. Good
So
for
good.
you.
And around this time in the movie, this is also when we're introduced to evil. This is the
Yes.
being known as evil. And he is planning a he's planning to get the map from the Time Bandits, because if he gets the map, then he'll be able to escape his like isolated, like secluded chapel of doom. Basically, his fortress of doom that the Supreme Being basically exiled him to. So he starts planting the ideas of the Time Bandits to go take the map to find the ultimate object of ultimate satisfaction or something like that. It's a
Yeah.
really long and weird name, but the Time Bandits are like, well, that's treasure. Let's go get that, but we got to get Kevin first. So as Kevin is like chumming it up in ancient Greece and just basically loving life, like Kevin like loves it here so much, he's decided that, hey, I'm just gonna stay in Greece and you're just gonna be my dad now. And King Agamemnon was like, well, absolutely. You saved me from the Minotaur. You're gonna be my son. I'm gonna raise you up to be my heir. You're gonna be prince of the throne. It's gonna be awesome. And then the coronation party happens. Kevin, you want to take this one? Or sorry, David, you want to take this one?
That's
I'm
my
losing it
dad's
here.
name.
It's
Call me
really
Mr.
hot
Clark.
in here. Huh?
My dad's name is actually Kevin, so.
Ah, okay. It's the David, son of Kevin of the House of Clark. Will you take this one?
Yeah, so guess who comes out in their like pinata-ish costumes to partake in the fun? The Time Bandits come prancing in to be a part of the show, and along the way, just kind of like whisk Kevin off in a magic trick in which they like enclose them. What is it like? They enclose themselves in a box or something like this.
If I remember it right, they're going around and be like, hey, we're gonna do this great magic trick. Give us all your like gold and like stuff. Because it's a huge party, everybody's clapping. They're taking like bracelets and stuff. Where hey, we're gonna do this magic trick. Give us all your stuff.
Yeah,
They drag Kevin down to the middle of the stage. They bring up this curtain that surrounds them and like 360 holds it up, and then they drop it, and then ooh, they've disappeared through one of the time portals.
yeah. And Sean
And
Connery loves it at first, but then is like, wait a minute, where'd that kid go?
also, where's
I
my
was really
crown?
looking forward to being a dad. Such a whimpery look that he has on his face.
I
Poor
know.
Sean Connery.
Shooting nothing but net for 40 years, and this is the low point.
Yeah, this
So,
was the turning point. This is because I think he did Apocalypse Now after this, right?
he wasn't in Apocalypse Now.
Ooh, that was Marlon Brando. I don't know why I thought he was in that movie. I don't know. For some reason,
That
I
would
get
be a whole different movie.
for some reason I've always gotten this vibe that Sean Connery and Marlon Brando have like very similar personalities. So I've always been like, I feel like Sean Connery's a total dick on certain sets, and it's like I'm just not even gonna learn my lines, and you're gonna have to deal with it. But
You're just like, I'm fucking Sean Connery. I don't
well,
need this shit.
I can eat my words because this movie proves that entire theory wrong. So this is my public
Sean Connery.
apology to Mr. Connery. You know, if I ever get the chance, I will kiss your feet in appreciation.
Good shit.
Yeah.
Good shit.
So we are whisked off into another time warp.
Yes. Where we fall upon, oddly enough, Vincent and Pansy again. But they're not in ancient medieval England. They're in, well, they're on the Titanic.
Yeah.
And again, this is another great scene with like Shelley Duvall and Michael Palin, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It Another good like weird like bit scene that when you're like a little kid goes over your head, but when you get older, you're just like, ah, dick joke. So they crash into the Titanic. Now they're filthy rich with all this ancient gold and silver and myrrh. And they're just like, we're going to live like kings. We're going to travel through the Atlantic and then we're going to get on. We're going to go to the age of legend. And then that's where we're going to get the ultimate object of ultimate greatness in this fortress out in the middle of nowhere. And this scene is great because it gives us like I think the first bit of like character and like the first bit of like real character from Randall, the main time bandit, the leader, Dave played by David Rappaport.
Yeah.
David, did you expect that scene?
Yes and no. I think that he was definitely the person who spoke for the group throughout the movie. I mean, when he ran into Robin Hood's band of thieves earlier and they captured them and then they had that like pissing contest about who's the more dastardly thug.
Yeah.
It was apparent that there was going to be some character shown through Randall, but that then this kind of like intimate moment, not I shouldn't say intimate, it's not like a dramatic moment by any stretch of the means, but there's a character moment between Randall and Kevin in which Kevin was in the previous scene, he was also finally given an opportunity to show a bit of his character and connect back to the beginning where he's this like, you know, pseudo parentless kid who's wanting of a mentor and of an interesting life in which he can exercise his curiosity for the world. And he's finally given that in that whole, ancient Greece scene, but it's ripped away from him by the Time Bandits because they got to continue along their journey. And there's kind of finally like a thesis and antithesis going on. Not to say that there should be, because again, we're talking about a kids movie here. But
Kids movies can have depth, but
yeah,
I
I
get
mean,
your point.
it's odd that I also say this because kids movies nowadays, unless you're really watching like a Pixar movie or maybe like a decent DreamWorks movie, you're not really going to find a whole lot of meaning in a kids movie anymore.
Which is
And
kind of weird, right?
no, I
Because
mean, I think it's like this, not to be like cynical or anything, but I just think that marketing that kind of movie to kids got harder and harder the more pop culture moved away from trying to make sure the kids are learning and growing and to let's sell the shit out of some toys in the Walmart toy section. And it's like, a movie like I guess the most popular recent one was Trolls World Tour, which it's like, come on, I'm sure there is little to no substance to that movie, and I'm not saying it as like a prude, like I'm gonna stick my nose up at it. If you have a 4-year-old and you're gonna watch Trolls World Tour, yeah, that's the movie that you're gonna watch. But your kid's not gonna look back on Trolls World Tour with any form of like nostalgia. They're gonna be like, oh, that movie was kind of cringy that I watched that when I was a kid, because it's a bunch of trolls 3D animated to bounce around and make fart noises bouncing
is
around a
there
rock and roll stage. It's like,
is there any movies like I guess back in because like you and me were relatively like the same age, and a lot of the movies we watched when we were kids came out in like the 90s, late 80s kind of stuff like that. That's more along the lines of when like the kids movies like we were watching were coming out. And I guess like the early 2000s as well.
yeah, I would say up until like 2010, there was still a good churning out of kids movies because the 2000s were also the time of, even though it's not like cinematically significant, like Disney Channel original movies were also this really good era, or even movies that were shown on Nickelodeon was a really good era of movies that were not quite, meant to be impact kid movies, but still had like a lot of heart and story to them.
Which is
Uh,
kind of interesting when you think about it. It's like Disney kind of co-opted like the kids movie for like decades and decades and decades
yeah,
until like basically Pixar, right? Because if I'm thinking like it was like they released Snow White in like 1930 something, and it was until like Toy Story and everything in between, Disney was like, this is all mine.
a little bit. I think that well, after Toy Story was when I think they started to become like the mogul for it, like the monopolized we make kids movies kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because like throughout that time, there were still smaller production houses that were probably producing things like this, like Indian in the Cupboard, like
Oh
uh,
God, I
a
just
lot
got
of
hit by that. Wait, Indiana
United.
covers a Disney movie.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm pretty
Oh well,
sure.
then just goes to show. I mean, there was also like a few animated movies done by different like Warner Brothers and United Artists and um, that kind of had their time and then went away. Um,
Yeah, it's
Especially,
just
I
kind of
mean, Warner Brothers. When you think about it, they did a lot of good stuff. Like if I'm remembering correctly, they did things like the Brave Little Toaster, right?
Oh yeah, I think they did the Brave Little Toaster, and I think Rockadoodle was also Warner Brothers. I might be wrong on that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is also the point to which I'm talking about talking shit on the Trolls series, and then a movie about literally a talking toaster is supposedly the example of kids movies that teach you a lesson. But the Brave Little Toaster is also a really that was one of my favorites. So
Yeah.
I can't you know actually, I am completely wrong. The Brave Little Toaster was by the Walt Disney Company. Oh God,
Disney makes all the movies. We've
yeah.
officially figured it out.
I
Not
gotta figure out because this is getting on a tangent, but it's fine because we love talking our movies here. I gotta
like
find
okay,
out what
the
like Warner Brothers did. They had to have done something.
I'm just saying the pinnacle, like the kids movie that has substance, it's got heart. You will carry that with you well into adulthood. And it will live on forever. It's Iron Giant.
Oh
All
yeah,
right,
so that's a Warner Brothers movie.
Iron Giant is Warner Brothers.
Yeah,
Okay,
they also
got
did
one.
like the Pokemon movies. They did.
Oh, okay, well,
Yeah,
Pokemon is a genre in and of itself. All
yeah.
right. For those of you that were too young or just don't remember, Pokemon was more addictive than heroin. And I remember, like, there were fights on the playground based on who you liked better. Or who was better. Charizard, Bulbasaur, Squirtle. There was there were friendships broken over Pokemon. And made. But yeah. But that's like the thing. So sorry we got on this weird tangent about kids movies, but
Yeah. You know what
it life
we'll do
happens.
our episode we'll try to find some time to do an episode on animated kids movies because I want to eventually get Cats Don't Dance on this podcast.
Okay, Cats Don't Dance. I haven't seen that movie since I was like 7 years old. Probably. And I've been trying to rewatch it ever since. I don't know if I never thought it existed. I thought it was a fever dream when I was a kid.
Oh no. Cats Don't Dance is a movie that like every year or two I go back and watch because that is one of my favorite movies.
Not even favorite movies all time.
Yeah, because
All
it's
time.
but we'll talk about it sometime on the podcast. Let's get back to the task at hand here.
Back to the movie. All right. So, they are on the Titanic, and what happens on the Titanic? Jack and Rose meet, they fall in love, and the boat sinks.
Yeah,
So the boat sinks. They're now floating in the ocean on a
literally on a piece of door. I
on a
mean,
piece of
he
door.
predicted he predicted Titanic, the movie that is not
Bruh.
it,
Actually, that's a good point. Like, it's like Vincent and Pansy, they're falling in love, but it's like, oh, things are going wrong. And then, the boat sinks and they're floating on a door. James Cameron saw this movie. James Cameron owes somebody some fucking money. So,
that's
they're
for
floating
sure.
on the door. And then this is the point where it's like, Randall, we're gonna fucking die. You've led us into like utter destruction. We're gonna die on this in this water. And he's just like, no, boys, it'll be fine. A portal's gonna open in this giant thing in the ocean. Just let go of the door. It'll be totally fine. So obviously they let go of the door and everything is not fine. They're being flung around in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean during a storm. And then suddenly, we cut to a scene of an ogre and his wife on a boat.
In the middle of the ocean.
In the middle of the ocean. It just kind of just cuts to that. There's no... Yeah. So,
yeah,
ogre's
the
there.
transition wasn't very apparent.
Yeah. So the ogre's got some back problems. He's kind of sick. His wife is like, oh, we'll make food. Go out and, fish us up some grub. Ogre goes out there and he pulls out the time bandits in the net with Kevin. And he's like, look, I found little people and children. I'm going to eat you now. But the time bandits being smart, clever, and dastardly, they hijack the boat, knock the ogre and his wife up and overboard. And now they're sailing on to the isolated Fortress of Darkness and Doom to go get the object while evil is watching dastardly in his cauldron. And then the giant shows up.
Yes. That's actually one of my favorite sequences in this movie.
It's really cool. It's really imaginative, and it's really does look like something out of a weird dream. Like a weird dream like a kid would have.
I kind of like it because 1981, you're not quite in the special effects era, right? It's still,
not in the CGI era.
The earliest special effects we can really point back to is maybe 2001: Space Odyssey.
Well,
there might have been then there was Star Wars was another big pillar. I'm talking big pillar examples.
Oh yeah, because this and Raiders came out in the same year.
Yeah,
we were talking about that. That was dawn of computer effects.
Yeah, but even then, that used a lot of rotoscoping. If we're talking about the climax of the movie, and then this was being in the burgeoning of commercial use of special effects and wide use of it. Still found a way to use practical effects, even though again everybody is still using practical effects at this point. Still found a way to use practical effects in a very good looking way. I think even that this held up for what it was, because the guy looks massive on screen.
Yeah. So how it is he has this this giant appears, and as he's kitting up out of the water, the boat crushes and gets stuck on his head. So he's now wearing the giant ship on his head, and he's just walking out of the ocean and all this stuff, and it's this really interesting visual, because it's it looks so real, even though it's obviously just a guy in forced perspective or whatever, but it's how it's shot, and it's a masterful use of the camera and all the effects that goes into this. Terry Gilliam is really good at making ridiculous stuff look real.
Yeah,
he makes you believe this.
All that's going on here is just a dress set, some miniatures, and a guy in costume, but it looks like he's 100 feet tall.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is this is the stuff King Kong, Godzilla, stuff like that use. It's great.
Yeah, but that's the other thing too, is I think about special effects nowadays and how they would be used. And even when nowadays, when special effects have gotten pretty damn good, there's still that computerized film that you can notice over special effects that you sometimes notice it and you're oh, I'm watching something that's fake. And
I got a theory about that, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah. Okay. So, but here, it's just that you're watching something real, and I think if this is about what your theory is, because I'd like to hear about it now, but I feel like your mind is able to better believe or can recognize the actual texture of something real versus the very obvious fake texture that special effects still has.
Well, here's the thing. This is my mini rant on computer effects versus practical effects, because they're both special effects, but computer generated versus practical. There is no computer effect that can mimic a physical being that your brain can't pick out as bullshit. This is, and you can do this test. You can go back and watch John Carpenter's The Thing from 1980 something and the remake that came out in like 2016. In the original one, it's practical effects. There's a real physical thing there, and you can watch it, and your brain knows it's not real, but it knows that that is something physical, and you believe it more. You're like, that's not real, but it's not bullshit. Where it's computer, when you see the thing and the creature moving around, you're like, that's one, it's not real, and it's also bullshit.
Yeah.
It's really weird because your brain can tell when things are like the uncanny valley effect, where it's like it looks human but it's not human, kind of thing. It's like when you see a Cabbage Patch or like a baby doll. It's like it looks like a baby but it's not a baby, so it's just creepy.
Yeah, I think there's a level to that uncanny valley thing going on here, right? There's just like that, this looks fake, but I can still get along with it. And then we're still in that valley of like, this is fake and I don't like it. So,
Yeah,
and I don't know, listen, I personally think that until technology gets to a point where we can notice that it's, computer generated effects, like you rightly said, but we have to be told it is, or we have to look really close at it in order to tell. We're going to continue to not quite be satisfied by it. And I mean, I'm not saying anything that's, when you think about it, isn't obvious, but um, I just don't know quite what will get it there, because I think about also the level to which lighting and texturing and polygons, and even what gets me especially with computer effects is like, it's too fluid most of the time. Real movement, it can be very twitchy and unpredictable still, but computer effects is always very still rehearsed and fluid, and you know
that's the big reason why in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, where you have oh god, I forget his name, the guy who played Gollum.
yeah,
He's a great actor. Andy Serkis. When
yeah,
Andy Serkis is playing Gollum, he's in the full like suit. He's on set wearing like a green suit, and he's doing the performance. He's acting and all that stuff. And the big thing about that, it's like his movements are still there. There's still a real physical actor on set. He's still performing. His face is being captured. They're just putting a skin over it, and that skin is the Gollum features, right? The weird skin and all that stuff. And that's really good, like CGI. It's CGI shouldn't be a thing that replaces an actor. It should be a thing that enhances their performance.
yeah.
And I think that's really what Andy Serkis and a lot of like very good uses of it like show up. But in this is 81, so Terry Gilliam is full practical.
Yeah.
And on that note, back to the movie.
Yeah, another good tangent.
Hashtag tangents. So yeah, so eventually the giant gets a little sleepy because of some shenanigans, and sits down on a mountainside, takes his hat off, which is the giant ship, sets it down, and the Time Bandits emerge. They're like, we've made it to the land of myth and the age of wonder. So they trot off and they find an invisible wall. And they're so excited because this is what an invisible wall looks like. I never knew.
What a wonderful line.
One of the best like one-liners in the movie. I don't know why. It's great. Love that line.
Yeah.
And they break through the invisible wall and they find the ultimate fortress of ultimate darkness, where evil resides, and they trot in to go claim their prize, the greatest object in all of existence, which is a toaster.
2 thumbs up. That's
Two
what we've
thumbs
been
up.
looking for.
Found a toaster.
Yeah.
It's this weird like ultra like uber consumerist, like it's a toaster that not only toasts your toast, but it also like does your dishes, and it has Wi-Fi and yada yada.
It's the future of Ken Moore and Samsung and General Electric's catalog. This is what we're moving towards anyways. I mean, nowadays with like when you can have a goddamn iPad on the door of your fridge, it's like, yeah, of course it's getting there.
Of course.
It's only a matter of time before Roomba takes over all of the market cap.
Give it time. Roomba and Disney are going to be the last two companies fighting it out in the post-apocalyptic society
Oh my god!
we're going.
Can you imagine? You go to the New York Stock Exchange and all you can buy is like $500,000 shares of Disney or $600,000 shares of Roomba, because Roomba will be bigger.
Roomba's gonna be bigger.
Roomba will rule the
Wait,
world.
wait till you get Disney ovens. That's when we're gonna start getting some stuff going here.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that exists. By the way, I think Disney does do appliances, but
Oh
we'll get back
God,
to
I
that
hope
later.
not.
Different podcast. So they go there, and Evil, undoes the veil, and it's like, haha, you've fallen into my trap. And he traps the Time Bandits and Kevin in this giant cage suspended over, the labyrinthian tunnels that the thing does. And he goes off with the map, and he's now going to plan his ultimate escape and the destruction of the universe, and feed evil into humanity.
As you do.
As you do. It's a Saturday night. He's got to do something. And through some clever ingenuity, some fun sight gags, and some pretty good tension, the bandits manage to escape their cage. And Kevin convinces them to go back, and we need to take the map from evil. We can't let evil get out into the universe and ruin everything. Too late, but whatever. So they travel through the fortress. They eventually manage to swipe the map back, but evil notices them, and now he's hot on their tail. And evil is blowing things up, shooting lightning from his hands. A real Sith Lord's going down here. And the Time Bandits come up with a plan. We're going to go and we're going to grab some people that are going to help us here. We're going to defeat evil. So Kevin and Og, one of the other Time Bandits, goes and distracts evil for a period of time until they get to the final room for the final battle. David, you want to tell the people what this final battle kind of works out to be?
Well, let's see. Terry Gilliam decides to go out onto the production lot at whatever studio they were producing this movie at and say, who's an extra on a movie in the next slots? Let's just grab one or the other kind of people and just put them in a mishmash, and we'll see what happens. The bandits are, I think you said they split up, and Kevin and another bandit are meant to make a distraction while they can go off and find reinforcements in the other
Yeah.
half. And they come back with cowboys and medieval guys, and I'm pretty sure there was a spaceship involved.
Yes, there's a spaceship involved.
Yeah, and
Guys, this movie has a spaceship.
they
It's pretty
literally
awesome.
bring in the cavalry. So,
Actually, yeah, they do bring in the Old West Cavalry too. That's
exactly.
yeah.
So a magical battle ensues in which a bunch more sight gags happen, in which evil can use his powers to counter everything uh, that the army of darkness, or whatever you want to call this, can do. From blowing up to become a tomato in order to dodge arrows to
And a carousel of madness and
yeah, it's like it's just a bunch of gags basically, but the battle kind of comes to this fizzling halt when we finally get to meet the Supreme Being.
played by the most British staunch actors you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the Supreme Being this whole time was some sort of like poke of fun at like English prime ministership or something.
Yeah, it's because the ultimate being shows the Supreme Being shows up, and he's just this really basic, just elderly, like English dude in a suit who's
Yeah,
just,
he's just like a stuffy bureaucrat.
and it's really good, and I don't know why. It's just
No,
kind
I
of
think it's
funny.
very funny because it's deadpan all of a sudden. We've had this like super silly,
Goofy.
yeah, movie, and then all of a sudden there's just deadpan out of nowhere, and
It's like you and your friends were playing like cops and robbers in your room, and then your parents walked in and they're like, "Hey, you're 17, stop doing that." And then it's just
yeah.
like, "Oh, there's an adult now, and this is weird."
But I also find this part of the movie interesting because, you know, we don't really have like a set antagonist for Kevin, right? There's
Not really, no. Like
there's
Evil
evil,
is the
but he's more
antagonist.
like the antagonist to the Time Bandits.
He's also like kind of ineffectual, really. Like he does all the evil stuff at the end of the movie.
Yeah, actually, because throughout the first half, it's not really there's not really anybody chasing after the bandits throughout the first half. It's not till that second half, like you said, that somebody comes in, and even then, Kevin is, like we said, just being shuttled through time, literally, throughout the movie. And then this is like where finally Kevin gets to start making a difference. From about the time they escape from that prison,
Yeah.
that was where Kevin really starts to become a part of the movie. And though he's not really saying anything that's like deepening his character, he's starting to do actions that are contributing to at least the plot points that are going on with this.
A lot of the deep stuff of his character came with like the Agamemnon stuff. Like that's
Yeah.
where his like character started showing up, but all the action comes up here.
Yeah, and then like I think this is where that story of Kevin needing an imaginative world but constantly getting that ripped away from him finally comes back up, because now it's literally that the embodiment of the adult world in the form of this, like, stuffy bureaucrat, the supreme being, is putting a stop to everything. And like the time bandits have stopped their shtick. They're trying to get their jobs back. I mean, when you quite literally thinking about it, they're giving up their hopes and dreams for a desk job. Um,
Yeah, that's like the weird thing about like the end of this movie is the time bandits are like, look, God, we're sorry we stole your map, but could we go back to work? I mean, I got my resume, I got the suit, I got my, my desk is still warm, it'll be fine.
yeah, but I think it's like this specific point in which like all these things are going on, and Kevin's just kind of like awestruck at like what the fun stopping is, where the most meaning comes out in the movie, because it's a literal representation of somebody is a group of like ragtag, uh well, bandits is what they are, but I guess you could call them dream chasers, metaphorically speaking, who,
Yeah, they're chasing their dream of being, rich and like scoundrels and famous, and
yeah, they're doing what
it's
they love
really
and having
interesting.
fun, and like now they're at the prospect of losing everything they had because they think society, quote unquote, is going to rip that away from them. They're groveling at the feet of adulthood, and Kevin kind of has to watch this and be like, what? Well, what happens to me? Can I go home? Like, how do I move on from this? I can't we didn't do anything, all this stuff. And the supreme being, in again a very societal way, is just saying like, I don't know, you figure it out, dum dum. See ya.
He's literally like, well, the only reason we have evil is free will and stuff, so you need to make your own choices.
Yeah.
Bye. And we go into and then it's like smoke starts filling the room. The supreme being disappears with the time bandits. Kevin's all alone, and then Kevin awakens in his room where his house is now on fire. And he, firefighters break in through the door. They save Kevin. His parents are outside. They're like, no, we need to save all of our shit from like this terrible fire. All of our stuff's gonna go down. Oh, hi, Kevin. No, go back in and grab the toaster. And it's, to exemplify, his parents are kind of shitty parents.
Yeah,
If you
I like
didn't
it's the
know,
same thing that they were at the beginning. They're just obsessed with their toasters and toaster ovens and microwaves and catalogs and
their material, like consumerism stuff. That that is the thing about this movie. This whole movie is like it commentates on like consumerism, commentates on like like socialism, growing up, like giving away of your imagination to become an adult. There's a lot of interesting stuff in this movie.
yeah, it's
And
almost
so
like it's as if after reviewing this plot, it kind of becomes even more apparent that this entire film is a commentary on like how, I mean, yeah, it's a coming of age movie in which Kevin has to realize that adulthood is totally bland, and I need to hold on to this idea that there's more out there for me to try and be curious about. But then there's like an exploration of the way that, from an adult's perspective, knowing all of what happens once you make that like story transition in your own life, all the things that are really doing that to you, because as a kid you don't understand it, and that's how it comes out in this like surreal dreamlike representation for Kevin, but you know, the consumerism, the bureaucracy, the weird way history has affected everything, those are the things that as an adult, you know, make people the way they are once they get crushed by, you know, life. And Kevin's parents are just that embodiment of like, well, we can't be imaginative, we can't do what we love, so we may as well
Just
pray
buy
at the
things to
altar
make
of
us.
consumerism.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But his parents do get a comeuppance at the end when the firemen come out. And they're like, so this is what started the fire. Somebody left something in the toaster oven. You should have checked that before you went to bed. And they open it up, and there's a lump in there, and it's a piece of pure evil. Because evil, when the Supreme Being came and blew him up, and a piece was left behind. And as Kevin gladly says, no, Mom and Dad, don't touch that. And obviously they're just like, oh, no, we're going to touch it. They touch it and they explode. Explode, disappear forever. And how Kevin is an orphan there, with nothing but pictures of him throughout time. Where Sean Connery, the King Agamemnon, also a firefighter now, drives off into the distance. And that is where the movie ends.
Yeah, you know, I kind of feel like
Yeah.
that last moment is this final little plea that Gilliam makes to maybe it's to kids that are watching the movie, maybe it's to his own kid's self. It's like this last little plea to be like, you don't want to grow up and become these people. Go do what you want. Go still continue to be the kid at heart that you know you are as right now, and it will make you a better person in the future. Because that's who Gilliam became, and he probably, I mean, it's very apparent if you ever watch an interview with him in it. He's such a energetic, silly, childlike person, and that's where his genius comes from because he allows himself to be that person.
That's a lot of what this movie is. If we get down to the heart of this movie, it is be like grow up, but you can't stop being a kid. Because when you stop being a kid, you lose something of yourself.
Yeah.
You lose that whimsy, you lose that wonder, you lose that imagination, which is basically the whole movie.
Yeah.
Again. So, David, did you think you would have liked it this much?
You know, after talking about it again, I've actually come to really appreciate this movie.
Now, I really hope you come to appreciate the next movie on our list, 12 Monkeys,
Yeah.
starring Bruce Willis, Brad Pitt. It's going to be fun because we get to hear David talk about how much he loves Brad Pitt.
It's going to be a good one.
All right. We'll talk about that right after this.
Hey, Dean, did you hear about my new podcast?
Nah, fool, what is it?
I started a podcast where I review different colors of custom paint and how fast they dry.
Well, that's cool, but
Are you going to tune in?
I'll let you know what I think, but you should probably find something that doesn't suck and use Anchor.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free.
I like free.
It's a super easy way to record, edit, and distribute your podcast to platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, all without having to overcomplicate the process. You can even make money with no minimum listenership.
I like money.
And you'll make plenty of money if you have a better idea for a podcast. You have an idea for a podcast that's more exciting than watching paint dry? Then you should head over to Anchor.
Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And we're back.
And we're back. All right. So, Monsieur David, this next film we're going to be talking about, some would call it an old school classic, a 90s era sci-fi movie that's both smart and weird. It's 12 Monkeys. Have you ever seen 12 Monkeys before?
No, this is also one I haven't seen before.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
both of these I've seen bits and clips of, but this was the first time I've watched both of them.
Okay. I mean, I've seen...
We'll come to find out that on this podcast, David has not seen a lot of stuff that, as a film student and as like a supposed film buff, he should have seen, but was too busy playing video games, watching baseball, living life.
Yeah, life happens. I unfortunately, lived indoors most of my life, so of course I watched a bunch of movies. So yeah,
We get our kicks.
had one season of Little League, sucked ass at that, and went back inside to watch movies. So yeah, so 12 Monkeys. I've seen this movie probably a couple dozen times. Uh, Another one of those weird movies that for some reason my parents like really much enjoyed. So I remember like watching it, but not like I wasn't watching. My parents were watching it, and I just kind of observed the film. But I've seen it, a bunch of times. But David, so this was the first time you ever watched it all the way through. Do you want to say like anything about like that first experience of it, or like anything you heard about it before going into it, or anything like that? Because I
Well,
don't know if this movie carries a lot of things to it.
for me, what my familiarity is with this movie is it's often cited uh, as a screenwriting student as an example of that like repeating plot
Mm-hmm.
in which the ending is the beginning and then it's a whole loop of time, um, and it's definitely a good example of that. That's what I will say, is that confirmed. There's a reason everybody talks about it. But on top of that, my fascination particularly was with one character actor in this movie, Brad Pitt, who I have a theory, as I've this is me kind of repeating something that I've seen before and just being like, yeah, that is it. But Brad Pitt is the greatest character actor of all time, and you can't convince me otherwise.
The man who has been a leading man for the last 20 years is nothing more than a very pretty character actor. Is that what you're telling
Listen,
me?
Benjamin Button is nothing compared to the wackadoo performance that you get out of Fight Club, in which he's a character actor. It's like you can't get much better than when Brad Pitt is able to be off the leash, I think. And this
This
movie is prime Brad Pitt going crazy.
it's kind of interesting because I think Brad Pitt, because now Brad Pitt is he's kind of the film's like pseudo kind of antagonist, but he's just a supporting player. The movie stars Bruce Willis, but this is a Brad Pitt movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like Man versus Society, and then Brad Pitt is the agent of chaos.
Yeah, but like let's talk about Brad Pitt for a second, because when you watch this movie, you go in and you're just like, okay, this movie came out in 1995, same year as Seven, year before Interview with a Vampire, and like True Romance was a few years before this, where he played a small role, but that's like it. That was all Brad Pitt, and this was like all within a year. So 12 Monkeys was like the first movie a lot of people saw him in. My mother saw this movie when it came out and was convinced Brad Pitt was a mental patient they found for the movie.
Just a beautiful mental patient.
Just pretty as sin, but she thought he was legit insane. And he does a fantastic performance in this movie.
Oh yeah, I'd believe it. I mean, it's as if like a Calvin Klein model got his hands on a bottle of Adderall and took the entire bottle, and then his brain got disconnected from itself.
Yeah, and he's just kind of spinning at this point. It's
Oh
it's
yeah.
a very good performance. And this is again one of those movies that broke out Brad Pitt, because
Hmm.
he plays, he's in Seven playing Detective Mills, and he's in this, and it's all in the same year. So this is range
Well, that's
for an
interesting. I wasn't
actor.
aware of that.
Oh yeah, they both came out in 95. Both were released in 95. So he probably filmed Seven, and then I believe he filmed 12 Monkeys like right after.
Yeah.
And because Seven didn't get released, he had no idea what that was going to do. David Fincher, that was David Fincher's like first major film, if I'm not mistaken. And he was like, I can get a glorified cameo in a Terry Gilliam movie. I'll fucking take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
interesting.
so another interesting thing about watching this movie too is that from the get-go, like first thing you see on screen is that green digital text of like, in the year in 1991, a homeless man said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
There's going to
know,
be a plague that brings about the end of civilization in 1996 or whatever the hell." And just based on that text alone, I'm already thinking I kind of get the whole of Terry Gilliam's filmmaking career now. It kind of he's a very like this was where I would realize that he's a huge what if storyteller, right?
yeah,
He basically his premises are well, what if the crazy homeless guy on the corner is telling the truth? Or what if a kid went on an adventure by going into his closet because he saw a monster in there? Or what if, um, the Messiah didn't actually want to be the Messiah, a la Life of Brian, or
That's
what
like
have you?
that's one of those things where you can get a lot of mileage out of that too, because here's like, okay, this is one of those weird like philosophical like theology kind of questions that comes up when you're, a crazy person like me.
Yeah.
Those weird homeless people you see at like the McDonald's or the bus or whatever, where they're just like, Jesus is talking to me and he's telling me that Jesus is talking to me and he's telling me that you're in grave danger. Now, obviously, in reality, you're just like, this guy's fucking crazy. But there's that little weird thing in the back of your mind where it's like, okay, what if this 0.001%, 1% chance God actually talked to this guy and told him to tell me something?
You never
And
know.
that's like Terry Gilliam's whole shtick. Well, what if life lived by that 0.001% chance where it was real?
I like it.
Yeah. Was it? Yeah. Think about it. Next time a homeless guy says, Jesus told you to give me $5, maybe give him 10. He might be telling the truth.
Yeah. Well, and there's another interesting point that I kind of just realized about that fact, about the premise of this story, is the other thing I was thinking about while watching it, but now I realize is that it made me think that, oh, wow, that's a really simple premise when you think about it, is like, well, what if the homeless guy on the street was telling the truth? And then he just kind of like delves and note cards out this whole movie of like this fantastic world and huge story that he sends Bruce Willis on, that really, when you think about it, anybody could have thought about. All it
Yeah.
took was him being like, let's just do something weird and crazy and see what happens. And it really makes me feel like it's just, I really like this movie because while Time Bandits, looking back on it, I think is a much more poignant movie than I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
This movie is like filmmaker's delight, where I can be like, this makes me feel like making a movie is possible. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
This is this is an interesting thing about this movie that I think a lot of people don't get. So Terry Gilliam, generally, he will write and direct his own movies. He doesn't work with other screenplay or other screenwriters or anything like that. This is one of, I think, 2 or 3 films that he's ever done where he didn't write the script.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this film is based off of a short French film, La Jetée, that came out in the 60s. I watched it in preparation for this episode. And it's a really weird like art house movie, but like to say that and 12 Monkeys, or like La Jetée and 12 Monkeys are the same thing, is really wrong.
Yeah.
It's a thing where it's like, well, they're both paintings and they both use the color blue. Yeah, they're the same thing, right? No. But they're close enough to where you can say, okay, they took influences from each other. And then the 2 writers, David Peoples and Janet Peoples, they wrote the screenplay and it was presented to Terry Gilliam, and Terry Gilliam fell in love with it because he was like, this is like Brazil and like Time Bandits and a lot of other movies in my oeuvre. Like, I can't believe anybody else thinks like this. I thought I was a crazy person.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't a story of his own mind, then it's exactly up his alley.
Yeah, like I think that was one of the things he said in an interview. He's like, I was surprised I didn't write this movie.
Yeah.
He's like, I didn't think anybody else would write a movie like this except me, and then I found 2 people who did.
Yeah,
And
and that must be kind of fun for him in theory. I mean, like, just to happen upon something that you didn't write and then all of a sudden being able to, it's like, great, half the work is already done. Now I can just have the fun of directing it.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here where it's, Terry Gilliam and he's a perfectionist and he's, pretty good definition of what an auteur is. And he just, pours on his style on there, and you get the movie. But again, this movie is a lot of like really interesting concepts. So we should also tell people this is not like Time Bandits. This is not a kids movie.
No, very adult movie. Very. We could probably label this a thriller, like an action thriller.
Yeah, almost a horror movie in some places too.
Maybe
There's a part in
so.
this
Maybe
movie that
so.
that is the definition of my worst nightmare, and we will get into
Yeah.
that. But there's a single scene in here, and it haunts me to this day.
Yeah, and
But yeah.
there's certainly elements of like satire and comedy sprinkled throughout because of the futuristic scenes and some of the stuff that goes on in the present
Yeah.
because it's Terry Gilliam's like lens on the world. But other than that, like this is a very tense, suspenseful movie.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that for a first time viewer, it's gonna be really weird and off putting, and then you're gonna like finish the movie and it's gonna go in your head, and you're like, I think I'm gonna watch it again. I wanna go back in and see what the fuck was going on. This movie is great for repeat viewings, I think.
Yeah, because I think like the first half of this movie, if we want to jump into like plot summary, we can
Absolutely.
really we can really glide past the first half of this movie again because it's really just Bruce Willis's character is this like what would you I said prisoner earlier, but I don't know if you would quite call him that.
Well,
It's
I guess let's describe the world of the future, because I think that's gonna
yeah.
help. In the world of the future, like 1% of humanity survived the like plague, and they live underground, and Bruce Willis lives in underground in this like big facility under New York City, and they take prisoners or like convicts, people who are like criminals and stuff like that, as quote unquote volunteers, and send them topside to go collect samples and stuff like that, so they can study it down below and try and come up with a cure. Now, Bruce Willis kind of has proven himself to be pretty good at it. He follows protocol. He's very observant. He knows what to do. And also, I don't know what it is about dystopian New York covered in snow, but it is like one of the most hauntingly beautiful things I've seen captured in a Terry Gilliam movie.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. So that's like the thing. And it's a Terry Gilliam future, so everything's this weird, like, pseudo steampunk 1950s, like, cyber tech that's not, like, advanced, but it just works that way.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. It's a really weird, interesting world the future is in. But they discover time travel, basically, and they're like, hey, Mr. Bruce Willis, we're gonna send you back in time to figure out what the hell happened so you can bring back a cure.
Yeah, and he's only supposed to be sent back, to 1995 like a year ago because
No, I
there's
don't think it was a year ago. It's supposed to be decades ago, like a
oh yeah,
long, long time ago.
I guess like in theory my timeline is off. Yeah, so he was 10 years old in 1995.
Yeah,
So at that point it's probably 20ish years beyond that.
yeah,
Um and then he's supposed to be sent back to 1995 because that's a year before the plague in 1996.
yes.
So the expectation is that he'll go back and look for signs of the 12 monkeys uh,
Which is a
cult that's supposed to have done something to make all this happen to humanity because
what they
there's
know
these
about him
like
is very vague. It's supposed to be like a terrorist organization that released it, but they don't really know.
yeah, all they really have to go on are these like spray painted stencils that have been found all over dystopian New York, and then that they are supposed to be able to find in the past in order to like follow the clues to lead them to whoever did it. Um, but from the get go, he is sent way too far back in the past and is sent back to 1991.
Yes, and this is really where we get some interesting stuff out of the movie that already plants the seeds of the crazy stuff that's going to happen later in the movie.
Yeah,
So it starts. Bruce Willis is has been arrested by the police because he gets sent back in time and he's just blottoed because like the time travel, his body's not used for it, his brain's not used to it. It's having this weird effect on his like psyche because he like the human mind's not supposed to like handle this really well, is like what
yeah,
they say in the
especially on top of
movie.
the fact that he was basically a dog in the cage in the future.
Yeah. That's the thing about this movie, because it says a lot about like the human psyche and its ability to rationalize the irrational. And that's one of the reasons Bruce Willis is picked to go back in time, because he's a rational thinker, and the theory was that his mind would be strong enough to deal with going into the past without basically going insane.
Yeah.
But he goes a little crazy, just a splash of
Just a
crazy,
teeny bit crazy.
teeny bit crazy.
A
So he
teeny
gets,
bit crazy to the point where he's institutionalized.
yeah, where he meets your boy Brad Pitt, who gives him the tour of the asylum, and this asylum looks like a Russian gulag. It looks like it was abandoned and they moved back in like a year later.
Yeah, it's like, it's very, how would I put it? I think the Basket Case music video from Green Day came out just a year before, and it's like that. It's very,
It might be the same set.
yeah, it's crazy people walking around everywhere, zonked out on drugs, a small TV up at the top of the room playing game shows, and then
There's
Brad Pitt
shit
is kind of
written on
like,
the walls. There's stuff everywhere. Everything's all beat up. The paint's peeling.
yeah, it's looked like the only cleaning agent they use to clean it is bleach. Um, and then Brad Pitt isn't just in the middle of it babbling like a madman, and I eat up every second of it.
It's good.
Yeah,
It's real good. So we have our boy Bruce Willis. His character's name in the film is James Cole. Everybody calls him Cole. So
yeah,
Cole, he's in this insane asylum. And he's assigned a doctor, I believe. Madeline Stowe is the actress who plays Catherine Riley. Riley, Dr. Riley.
yes,
Yeah, she is the doctor assigned to Cole's case, and she's interviewing him. He's going in front of the board where he becomes a lot more lucid. Like his faculties are coming back, and he tries to explain to everybody that, look, you need to let me go so I can search for the 12 monkeys and save us all from a global apocalypse. Don't
yeah,
worry, guys, I'm not crazy. While sounding like an
definitely
absolute crazy
believable.
person.
Definitely believable.
Okay, David,
Yes.
if you were sent back in time with that mission, would you tell anybody that shit? Would you?
Well, so this is interesting because what you said about the psyche really comes into play here. When you're dealing with the apocalypse and you're dealing with the prospect of being sent back to a proverbial cage, and especially dealing with the prospect that if you don't play this a certain way, you're kind of gambling on your freedom and the fate of the future.
Mhm.
I could see how you might have no choice but to plead with these people to believe you. But at the same time, this is certainly where Gilliam starts to play with that premise of like, what if the crazy guy's telling the truth? Because there's a little bit of doublespeak in that everything he's saying, if you disconnect from knowing what you do know about Cole, it's absolute maniac shit.
Yeah,
But knowing what you know, it's one of those things where it's like, wow, this is actually a very interesting way to look at. I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent. When
it happens. Go for it.
before being a film student, I was a psychology major, as you are, um, and I had this really good professor while I was a psychology student who always made a point to say reality is subjective, and what we experience as one individual is maybe totally different from what somebody else experiences, and we technically have no clear proof to prove otherwise. All we
Yeah,
can say is that we have a collective experience, and that is how we form truth and reality. And it's one of those things where that I think that thought really comes into play here of like, you really can never tell what is real. Uh, and while Cole is living one reality to the doctors that are on the panel reviewing him to see if he's clinically insane, it's not reality. And even though it clearly is to us, the viewer, how are they supposed to be proven otherwise? And that's kind of, interestingly enough, a very genius conflict that Gilliam uses, or even Peoples uses, to really get this story going, because now you're firmly in the shoes of Cole of like, okay, how are we going to get out of this situation? This is
and
an impossible situation.
this is another thing. It's Cole has that insanity thing going on where he's trying to convince them of a reality that he is the only one privy to. And
Yeah.
everyone thinks he's insane. And it is the main theme throughout the movie. And through his arc, he goes from purely believing that he is from the future and that he has come back to save everybody to I don't know whether or not I am completely insane and I have no idea what's going on anymore. And the
Yeah.
central theme of conflict comes down to, have we just been following a schizophrenic for the last 90 minutes?
Yeah, there's another element to which Gilliam, like we said earlier, his whole thing is believing in a world that is around you but you can't see it. And that's certainly going to come into play as we continue on further, because from here on out, Cole basically makes a pact with, well, no, is he, let's see, where do we go from here? I think it's that he's interned. He will be a patient here and is supposed to be treated. But one night,
Him
Brad
and
Pitt,
Brad Pitt's character's name is Jeffrey Goins, if you needed a reminder.
it's Brad Pitt to me.
He's always Brad Pitt.
Yeah,
Problem with
I
being a
mean,
famous character actor. Everybody only knows your real name. No one knows the character.
yeah, and they basically he helps him. I don't know if there's actually like a clear deal struck at all. I don't think there is. It's mostly just that Brad Pitt is super insane, so he just decides to cause some havoc, and this creates an opportunity for Cole to escape.
Well,
Um,
high as shit on like some grade A painkillers.
yeah, that too. And during the escape, he basically corners himself.
Yeah,
Um,
he manages to unlock the door and go down through the hallway, and he's trying to make his way to the front door, but I think he makes a wrong turn somewhere or something like that, where he walks into like a surgery,
yeah,
and that's when he's like, "Oh shit, I'm
or
in the
it's like
wrong
an
wing."
MRI room or something like this.
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then he gets cornered, and they grab him. The men in the white coats take him away and strap him down in like a holding cell that is just like big padded room, and then he just disappears.
yeah,
They have no idea where he goes. And this is when, and this is another point in the movie where you're like, Cole goes back to the future, quote unquote, and they're just like, "What did you learn?" He's like, "You sent me back to the wrong time. Like, I don't know what's going on." And you can start seeing the toll this is taking on Cole's like character and his
yeah,
mind. Like, he's starting to like kind of lose a sense of like when things are happening and what's going on. He's
yeah.
still
This is one case in which I think that whole I feel like this would be at a point in the podcast where we would have stopped to be like, well, wouldn't this really have taken a toll on somebody? Like we always find the little plot holes in every movie we
yeah.
watch, but this time Gilliam definitely answers our questions before we even ask them, because it really, they really press the gas down on the fact that time travel would be jarring to anybody, and
And
Cole is not taking it well.
I think that's an interesting thing, because when you look at, because we've done a time travel movie before, we've actually done two now. We've done Back to the Future and we've done Time Bandits. In Time Bandits, it's complete fantasy. Like the
Yeah,
whole going back in time, it's like it's done through the eyes of a child, to utter whimsy, complete fantasy, right? Back to the
yeah,
Future, it's kind of the same thing, but Marty still has like a culture shock. He's just like so confused as to what's going on, and I think that's the stages of like your time travel, like how it would affect somebody. It's when you're like super young, you just really don't understand it, so you just kind of roll with it. When you get
yeah,
teenager or whatever, it's like, well, this is kind of cool, it's kind of adventurous, but it's not like my reality isn't so set in stone. I can still kind of just jive with it. It's just kind of jarring. Cole, like, he is broken as a human being, because he's just like, my reality of what I've known is shattered every time I go back. And it's really good. Like how he portrays the character. How Bruce Willis portrays Cole in this movie is insanely good.
Yeah, I guess like the same point we're making about Brad Pitt and how, full throttle he goes into his is Bruce Willis really commits to this. And, Willis is actually a very good actor. I mean, he's known for his action movie stuff, but he's a very studied actor. He's done Broadway shows and he's done a lot of like drama style things. One of my favorite performances of his is when he did the Moonrise Kingdom and he plays
Oh
the
yeah.
sheriff.
Mhm.
Has a lot of range, and I think here he shows that side of himself that can match Brad Pitt's energy and just like totally go full into being insane.
That's the thing. If you wanted convincing that Bruce Willis was more than like this action hero actor, and he can play like a very deep emotional like figure, that's this movie. Same with Brad Pitt. This is a movie that's very good at showing like against type, you know, these two movie stars are. Because like, let's not get this wrong. Brad Pitt and Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis was a movie star when this movie came out, and Brad Pitt became a movie star after this movie. And it's just interesting to see it's like that peak of like what these two guys could do if given the ability to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah. So what happens next, David?
Well, from there, the council reconvenes and decides what to do about this Cole going to the wrong time situation. And they've decided to try him out again. They're going to send him back to the correct time now. They've made sure of it. They double checked their math apparently, and
That's the
he's gonna
best
go
part.
back.
Is this time travel is just super shoddy.
Yeah, you could tell that they. It's kind of interesting because I like the fact that the time travel isn't this science like in other movies where like we figured out time travel, we know exactly how to do it. It seems like in this movie they're like, well, we kind of figured out how to do it. We don't really still know exactly what it is, but we know that
You
if we
know,
try these things, time travel has happened. So we may as well just keep, the wheel
giving it
turning
a
here,
shot. Yeah.
which is
It's
honestly really a smart way to get around that.
yeah. I think that's the cool thing is like how they're learning time travel is like how you learn darts. You keep throwing at the dartboard until you get closer and closer to the middle. And that's how they're doing time travel. They're just throwing these like people at the dartboard and seeing which one of them gets closest to the bullseye.
Yeah.
So yeah. So but they still fuck up and send him back just a hair too far. Just a little too far.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Like 190 years too far back, something like that.
Yeah, he lands on the battlefield of, well, in the trenches, really, of, I think it's World War One France?
Yeah, like in the yes, he's in the trenches in France during World War One, buck ass naked, very
Oh,
confused.
totally in the nude. You see a
Complete.
lot of Bruce Willis's ass in this movie.
You're welcome, anyone out there who's really into to bald tough guys.
And Brad Pitt's ass, actually.
You also do get to see Brad Pitt's ass, so
Yeah.
you know, little from column A, little from column B. So he ends up back there, and in the trenches he sees another time traveler,
Yeah.
his buddy Jose.
I believe it's Jose.
Yes.
Yes. Because he
So
doesn't look like a Jose to me, but
me neither. So he sees his friend Jose, who's in the trenches with him, and he's just like, Cole, like, oh my god, they send us back to the wrong time. Oh my god. And you kind of realize it's like, oh wait, Jose's in like a full like military uniform. He's like hurt from the shrapnel. You're just like, he's probably been back in like World War One era France for like probably a couple of months at least.
yeah.
And Cole's like, well, what the fuck's going on? It's like, don't worry, just find the 12 monkeys. And then Cole, boom, goes back to 1995. I don't, it just kind of cuts to him in 95, right?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because during the fact, I was like, wow, that was a really intense scene. That's so cool. But after the fact, I'm like, well, this really is only like it's kind of filler. You know, it's kind of like just an opportunity for them to set up something that will happen later in the movie when they didn't really need to, because there will be a point at which there are two things that kind of prove Cole is telling the truth, right?
Yes.
And one of them is he predicts something, but the other thing is that he has a bullet from World War One. Is it that he removes it from his own leg? Correct?
No, no. Dr. Riley, Catherine, she removes it from his leg while they're on
Yeah,
the
yeah,
run. Yeah.
yeah,
Which,
yeah. Okay.
little jumping ahead, he meets up with his good doctor.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. The next major plot point is that he goes back and comes across Dr. Riley again, and this time kidnaps her at one of her um, conferences, and they go on like this springs off like the second half of the movie, in which there's this like, you know, hostage on the run kind of plot
Mm.
that takes up a lot of time. Willis is considered to be a, you know,
A
uh,
fugitive at this point.
yeah, basically a fugitive of the mental hospital that has come back to get the doctor that institutionalized him. And she thinks she's going to get murdered, but really all he's doing is trying to get her to believe in some way, shape, or form that he's come back to actually do something.
Yeah, and it's also kind of funny because it also gives a little like hint of the world and like his and who he was before all this, because the the biggest reason he kidnaps Dr. Riley is he can't drive a car and he
Yeah.
needs her to drive him to Philadelphia. And that's one of those things where you get kind of like this hint about him and who he was and all that stuff. And especially on the car ride, because he turns on the radio and he's hearing like music, he's looking at the trees, he's bringing in the air. This is the first time it slows down enough to where we learn stuff about Bruce Willis and his character and James Cole and who he is. Because the song comes up on the radio and it's Blueberry Hill,
Hmm.
which very old song. I think it's from like the 1950s, and it's it's a cheesy love song. Some of your grandparents probably danced to years ago. But he's just like, oh my god, I haven't heard this since I was like 10 when it was on the radio. I haven't heard music in years. And Dr. Riley's like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. And he's like, this air is magnificent. Like it's so clean. Like, oh my god, I've never been in a car before. He's like, I haven't been in a car since I was a little kid, and all this other stuff. And you're starting to kind of get the sense that if Cole is crazy, he is. If Cole is crazy, then he is incredibly happy to be lucid. And if Cole is telling the truth, then he does not want to go back to the future. He wants to stay here.
Yeah, because I think it's like a taste of normalcy and, um, I think this is it's another bit of that psyche argument that we've been going back to, where he's been in turmoil and chaos for,
Better
too
half of
much
his life.
time. And finally he's had a chance to, even though he's on the run with a hostage, take a breath of fresh air. And it's kind of interesting how fucked up of a situation it really is, because on one hand he's got a gun to a woman, but on the other hand it's like you're going on a car ride with a beautiful woman, and it's like, yeah, you can't help but feel like you don't want to leave this place. um it's kind of weird because
Oh,
it's
sorry.
it's like this love story that caught me off guard. Don't get me wrong, the actress is very beautiful, and it's there's a level to which this is just like the classic action movie romance, but
Mhm.
there's also a level to which I'm like, this kind of felt oddly organic despite the extraordinary circumstances that it's being put through.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because let's talk about Dr. Riley a little bit.
Yeah.
She's a very interesting character. So
Yeah.
she's not a traditional like damsel in distress kind of thing. What she is, she has a distinct and sincere desire to help people. And with Cole, she Granted, she is, literally kidnapped. She's gun to her head, all that stuff. But she still legitimately wants to help this guy that she thinks is crazy.
Yeah.
And once she figures out that he's not crazy, I think that's a thing where it evolves the relationship to where she's like maybe not in love with, maybe not immediately in love with him, but like
There's probably
you're
a level to which there's like Stockholm syndrome.
there's
You know?
probably, yeah, it's a Stockholm syndrome going on. That's actually a thing that comes up in the movie when Officer Stabler talks to her. But there's also a thing where it's like it goes from like pity to sympathy. Because at first I think she's pitying him because he's insane and she needs the help, and then she finds out like what's really going on and she starts sympathizing with him, and then sees what he's willing to like go through for what's going on, and then that like evolves a little bit. Like that sympathy starts to evolve with her character, and I think that's a really interesting point about like her arc in the movie.
Yeah, I don't think it's
Yeah.
any mistake that she's a psychologist, because I think there's the thing about this that I notice is that she's noticing the humanity in this guy who was up until this point labeled as like a psycho killer.
Mm.
And it's interesting that that's not just because he's getting soft and she's getting attracted to it. It's like he's getting soft and she sees that at like, oh, this is a very damaged human being who really needs my help.
Yeah. Which I honestly I think is a much more interesting way to go about like that kind of romance in this movie. Because let's be real, if it was like a standard action movie plotline where she would just kind of like around the midpoint of the movie she just kind of like turns and starts like falling in love with this like hard-boiled action movie guy once he starts showing an amount of like sympathy, then it wouldn't have felt organic. This, it feels organic. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't go from like, oh, I like the midpoint of the movie, it's like, oh, I'm not in love with you, I just sympathize with you because you're so like hurt and I'm sorry for that. And then they interact more and it builds, and it's a very interesting romance,
yeah.
if you can call it a romance. Hashtag Stockholm syndrome.
Everybody
Yeah,
finds love in different places.
that's true. So, and we move on. So the next part of the movie.
Yes, so we move on from there, and they're on the run, and he needs to make a stop somewhere. So, uh, well, we think Dr. Riley dies. He actually just stuffs her in the trunk, and he goes off to this mansion in the forest, which is actually belonging to one much more healthy looking, while still crazy, rich,
Brad Pitt.
yeah, Brad Pitt. We find with a ponytail and
Yes.
all.
So in this movie, Brad Pitt's dad is a very wealthy microbiologist, or he's a disease expert basically. He works for like this private like vaccine company, and he's out there, and Bruce Willis figures like, oh my god, this crazy guy I talked to in the asylum. He must be the one who started all those 12 Monkeys stuff, which he did do. Like Cole figures this out, and his dad is this guy who works with all these diseases. Obviously, this is the guy. Goes there to confront him, and chaos ensues at this party.
Yeah.
Homeless Bruce Willis walks into a bar, and crazy Brad Pitt makes a scene. That's what happens here.
Oh, he makes a scene, and it's definitely, well, I mean, Bruce Willis is breaking and entering. Brad Pitt is. It's like he's been waiting for a moment to let his crazy run free, and this is it. This is where he's finally going to be like, I'm going all in on this. And there's basically a mad dash for Bruce Willis to get out of the house, and a I can't get over that ponytail, dude. I keep picturing it, and I'm like, Brad Pitt in a ponytail just isn't great for me.
It just
But
doesn't work. Can't drive on that one.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's still great, but uh, he's just blabbering after him, and Cole basically escapes back through the forest, even though there's a search party out to get him, and that's where we learn that Riley was just stuffed in the trunk. She wasn't actually murdered, even though that's definitely what it seemed like what was going to happen.
Mm.
And we can finally drive back to the city and get away from these people because we need to. I can't remember what the specific piece of information is. There's something about like it's something to lead us on the 12 Monkeys journey, right?
Yes. So what happens is that so Bruce Willis goes back and he confronts Jeffrey, Brad Pitt's character, about the 12 Monkeys, and through that he realizes that okay, you're the one who started the 12 Monkeys, so you must have like some hideout somewhere that's doing all this. So he's like, he figures out where it is. It's this old like butcher shop deli thing and like the heart of like Philadelphia. It's in the slums somewhere. He figures that out, but when he goes back to Riley and is like, I figured it out. I know how to fix everything. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna tell them everything, and then when I come back, I'm home free. I don't have to do this anymore. And right there, Riley is still like, Cole, you're crazy. Like nothing's gonna happen. Okay, the cops are coming because obviously he broke and entered into somebody's house. Cops are on the way, and Cole is just overjoyed. He's dancing in like this pond that's by the car. Riley's like honking on the horn to get him over there, and all of a sudden, he's gone. Cole has disappeared once more to the future.
Yeah.
And this is where we get Dean's horror movie scene. Oof.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
what's Dean's worst nightmare?
this is Dean's worst nightmare. So, Cole is lying in this operating room in the future. It's kind of like an operating. It's just a closed off like cell, and
Right.
it's this big vaulted room, and there's fans going, and he's just like lying there. He's not moving. He's all hurt. He got shot in the legs, and it got removed in the woods, so he's not doing too well. And then he hears a voice, and it's this really weird, kind of like scraggly, like old guy voice just chiming in, and it sounds like it's coming through the vents. And it just asks, and it tells Cole, it's like, hey, do you even know what's going on? And Cole's trying to rationalize what this voice he's hearing coming through the vent. And he's like, who are you? All this other stuff. And this voice is telling him, well, maybe you're not even hearing a voice. Maybe I'm in the next room. Maybe I'm one of the doctors who's observing you. Maybe I'm just in your head. You have no idea. And that moment right there, where Cole starts questioning the reality of the world around him, is like my nightmare. Because my nightmare is like everything I've seen and heard up to this point in my life is complete bullshit, and I'm living in a padded room somewhere in like a mental asylum. That is like super nightmare fuel for me, and I don't know why. But this movie is just that whole thing where it's like, is your reality real, or are you just like completely insane and somebody's just observing you? And this is only a lucid voice that you're kind of hearing that's telling you you're crazy. And this is the point where Cole resolves to just go back to the past and stay there. And to me, this is a terrifying scene that ruins me as a human being. But I digress.
Some of us are afraid of disembodied voices.
Some people are afraid of
invalidating
normal
our
things.
entire reality. Some people, like me, are just afraid of flying.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of flying either, but it happens. I'm afraid of this reality, or this thing we call reality, being utter bullshit. But again, I digress.
Well, this was the perfect double feature for you then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These were great. Watch Brazil after this too. It gets better.
Yeah.
So after that,
right. So Cole wakes back up in the future and is reassessed to have been a smashing success in going back to the past, and is tasked to go back into the past one more time, I believe.
yes, one last time. This time to stop the plague from being spread.
Yeah. Now he's Master Chief. He's Prime Directive. So he will be sent back into the past, obviously, to find and disrupt, which most likely means kill, who's ever behind this, and is sent back, but with his idea that he's just going to turn himself in and try and live out his life in the past so that he can get away from.
This insanity he thinks he's going through. Because at this point in the movie, this is where Cole fully believes he's incredibly insane.
And, you know, I would too at that point.
Yeah.
Um, so he comes back and we find Dr. Riley on the corner of it's like this like underground record store co-op that the 12
12
Monkeys is
Monkeys.
supposed to have been conceived inside of, that Brad Pitt's character is supposed to have been around, and he is. She's basically now the crazy person on the street corner waiting for Cole to come back and for there to be a sign that she's not also going crazy. And it comes in the form of, well, Cole being on the street corner screaming like a crazy person because he thinks he's crazy.
Calling for the cops to come and arrest him and take him away.
Yeah,
And
yeah, probably not
yeah,
the greatest sight to see when you're sitting there wondering if there's going to be an apocalypse or not.
you know. And at this point, this is when Dr. Riley is like, okay, look, Cole, you're not crazy because I'm not crazy and I believe you now.
Yeah,
Because we found I found a picture of you that was taken in like World War One. You know, what you predicted was true. We need you. All right, you're not crazy, but Bruce Willis needs more convincing.
yeah. There's a few bits of evidence. There's that bullet that was pulled out of his leg that's confirmed to have been a bullet from World War One. So literally could have only been encased. That one, you know, I think there's a little less ado about it because it's like it could have been, you know, somebody could have just taken a bullet that was left over and put it into a casing and shot him, yada yada yada.
Yeah, but it's almost 100-year-old bullet at that point.
The one I find more convincing, although in theory you might be able to find more holes in it, is his prediction that there's like a news story that comes over the radio when they're driving the car, and it's of a boy who's stuck in a well, but he says it's fine, you know, he's just playing a prank on his family. It's all gonna
He's
blow
hiding in a
over.
barn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he predicts it exactly right in just this passing comment. And when in reality, it's like, oh, well, you know, I guess you could have predicted that. I mean, you could have said that, but it'd be pretty hard to just like pass that off as a coincidence at this point because there's two pieces of evidence, you know, he's completely disappeared on me out of nowhere, and there's no way to scientifically explain that.
Hmm.
So I find the boy in the well thing a little bit more compelling. But beside the point, now
Yeah.
becomes Dr. Riley tries to get Cole into a private area to like, let's talk this over. We need to talk this out. We need to figure out what's going on. So what other good place to go than a underground brothel?
It's not even underground, bro. It's an abandoned movie theater. Oh wait, no, you're talking about the motel. That's after the abandoned movie theater. Yes, they go to the Hooker
Yes.
Motel. That's right. Yeah, they go to the Hooker Motel. I was wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, you have it on record. I was wrong. David was right on this one.
Yeah, because I think they abandoned movie theaters before all of this when she still thinks he's crazy because
Yeah,
he
that's
kills two
that's
people and she's like, this man's a deranged murderer.
he killed the two guys that were trying to rape her, okay?
You know.
You know.
I think that's a Dave Chappelle show that goes, he rapes but he saves.
He rapes what he says, yeah.
But yeah, so they go to have a talk, and you know they explain to the clerk at the counter that this is just a conversation between two friends, even though he's obviously like, you know, yeah, pretty
Looks
lady
like
with
a homeless dude.
a pretty lady with a homeless guy. We think we all know what's going on here. So he calls the local pimp to come and take care of the situation.
Somebody's
And
on your turf. Yeah.
yeah, pimp barges in to be like, I don't know who you are, but this is my turf, blah 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 blah. You know, white guy acting like he's black. You know, that's basically what's going on here. And
Wow, gotta bring race into it. Mm-mm-mm. But yeah,
Listen, dude, either way. We then
let's
witness
dodge that can of bricks.
we then witness a brutal, bloody murder.
Does he actually kill the pimp? I don't
Oh
think.
no,
I think
yeah,
he
no,
beats
he
the
doesn't.
shit out of
He
him, but he
doesn't kill
yanks
him.
his teeth out.
Yeah, he removes his teeth, which who knows if that's more psychotic or not.
Well, Cole removes his own teeth because he thinks that's what the future people are using to track him.
Interesting.
See, not as crazy as you thought.
I guess,
The more and more we explain Cole's methods, the more insane he sounds. But we swear he's not crazy.
Yeah, I think
Maybe.
I think it's just like I've been getting really fascinated lately in like in the writing process of coming up with a script of like note carding all your ideas for what the premise can be. And like when the premise is the homeless guy telling the truth, obviously there's that note card you're going to come up with where he disembodies himself because he thinks he's being tracked. And lo and behold, this is another piece of that what if where it's like, of course he's going to take his teeth out because he thinks that's how they're tracking him. Whereas any, schizophrenic homeless, like paranoid schizophrenic might be like digging into their arm because they think there's a transmitter inside them that's beaming them back to, whatever
back to
cuckoo
Venus.
land that they're a part of. But it's just fascinating to me because like those small, like this is a general filmmaking point, I think, but those small details that make up your plot points and your shtick really make the movie different. It gives it a texture that then makes your movie feel a lot more original and deep and detailed versus another movie where it could be a cliche that you then put on it, or there's not a whole lot of thought put into the detail of the movie story. Whereas this, it's like they really pull out all the stops to come up with all the ideas. And it's terrifying at that because, I mean, when you think about it, imagine just getting your teeth removed by a guy on a Wednesday when all you were trying to do is stand your ground on the turf in your area because you've been having a hard time pimping.
Life's tough out there for a pimp. There's a whole song about it.
Life comes at you fast.
So they escape the pimp and the police and whatnot.
Yes.
And at this point, they have resolved, it's like, look, I believe you, you believe me, but Cole, we can't stay here. So they are going to escape. They're going to flee the country to the Florida, or not escape the country, they're going to go to the Florida Keys, somewhere south, just like basically run away from the whole situation and just try and just live out their lives and just not worry about this anymore. Because whether Cole is crazy or he's completely sane, he can't like function here. And Dr. Riley, she's pretty convinced at this point that Cole's telling the truth.
Yeah.
But there's no way to know for sure. So she wants to take him away from all this so he can get better.
Basically, yeah.
So they go to a Hitchcock double feature, which also, goddamn, I love the 90s, where you can have a Hitchcock double feature in the middle of like the slums of Philadelphia. And they put on disguises and they're getting ready to disappear and go onto a plane. And this recurring dream happens to Cole throughout the movie, where it's him as a little boy, Cole as a child, is seeing a man in a Hawaiian shirt getting shot in a airport terminal, while this woman with blonde hair like cries over his body. And he has this reoccurring dream throughout the movie. And when when they put on their disguises and he sees Catherine for the first time in her disguise, he realizes that she is the blonde woman from his dreams. And then he looks at himself and he realizes he's the man who gets shot in his dream. And it starts to realize that this wasn't a dream, it was a memory. So Cole realizes that his destiny is set. His memories, or his dreams aren't dreams, they're his memories, and they're gonna happen. So he goes they go to the airport, Cole is given a gun by Hosea. Hosea has reappeared to tell Cole, it's like, look, we figured out who the guy who's releasing the virus is. He's this guy. He's an assistant at Jeffrey's dad's like a tech or virus firm, and he's gonna release it. He's a doomsday theorist. Here's a loaded 48. You're gonna go in that terminal and you're gonna drop him, and you're gonna save the world. Got it? Cool. Big thing to drop on him
Yeah,
at
just
this
in
point in the
passing,
movie, but
you know?
whatever. Yep.
Like a memo.
Yeah. Also, bruh, so I don't know how it was in 95, but you just handed him a loaded 45 in the middle of an airport lobby and no one noticed?
Pre 9/11 America, dude. You could do whatever you want.
I guess you're right.
You could probably bring a full broadsword onto a plane and nobody would bat an eye.
Okay, I got a story about that, but fuck it, I'll just tell it now. So, you know Adam Savage from Mythbusters?
Yeah.
So, he was doing a thing. I think he was talking at like this convention or whatever, and he was yelling about how it's like, I don't see why these guys at the airport are, X-raying me and all this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I bring stuff on my carry-on all the time that would get me sent to Guantanamo Bay. They just never find it. And somebody asked, like, well, what's something? And he's like, oh, I bring these. And he pulls out, and it's like a foot-long, like, bamboo, like really thin, like, bamboo holder, right? He pops it open, and he pulls out these 12-inch long razor blades. And he's like, these are razor blades that are used for, like, cutting industrial foam and all that stuff. I carried these on my person as I walked through the metal detector and the x-ray machine, and no one batted an eye.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what's going through my mind is like, but I'm Savage. You're famous. You can do whatever you want anyway. It's fine.
Yeah, you're America's sweetheart. Don't worry about it.
It's great. God bless America. So, they're in the terminal. Cole now has a gun. They're trying to get through. He sees the guy, and this is his moment. Cole's going to be the hero. He runs through the terminal, pulls out that gun. He's going to drop this guy, but that's when he sees young Cole has arrived with his parents in the terminal, and he's like, wait, that's me. And then he gets shot by the security guards, and that is the end of Cole. Life has come full circle for him.
The disease gets away. Humanity is forever doomed. Dr. Riley is left in ruins, and young Cole is just ushered back to the car to watch
as the world burns.
World end.
It's a kind of a sad ending, but it's really satisfying for the character.
Yeah, very dark and cynical when you think about it. But what else did you expect from Gilliam, really?
The man who's made a whole career on dark whimsy.
Well, and then again, I guess, unless he had a hand in like retooling the script once he got a hold of it. I guess this really wasn't like him writing that, but I could tell that he probably had like some sort of punch-up pass on this, because I could tell there's a lot of humor in here that I don't feel like it could come from anybody else but him.
Oh yeah, like let's be real. For any screenwriters out there, when you hand a script over, the director, whether he's doing it consciously or not, is rewriting everything as he goes along.
Yeah, I mean that's his job, and
yeah.
That's what you face when you're writing something, is to then give it over to somebody who can make it, and they will make it theirs. But it's even then, I'm sure the peoples are happy that he got a hold of it, and I'm sure he's happy he got a hold of it. And all in all, this is a really good movie. And
this is like it's a fascinating movie too, because it makes you think a lot about your humanity and your psychology and like reality and your memories versus your dreams and like nostalgia. This movie has a lot of like random things about like nostalgia in it. Like nostalgia is a theme in this movie.
Yeah, and I think there's a general. It just again goes back to that auteurship that Gilliam has. And his primary directive is to intersect cinematic movie going of, we're going to go and have fun in the movie, with getting you to think about your life. Not just getting you to think, but specifically to think about how your life can break out of normalcy. And one of those things that I think that really pokes out in all of this is nostalgia, and how maybe nostalgia dictates how we want to live our life sometimes.
Mm.
Whether that's in the form of wanting to find normalcy, or whether that's in the form of realizing that the nostalgia is what is making us insane. It could go either way, I think. And it's very interesting to see how that did manifest. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, we actually got like two really good movies this week.
This is I'm really happy that we did go over these, and I hope we get to go over a couple more of Gilliam's stuff in the future. I still have yet to see The Man Who Killed Don Quixote.
Oh, I want to see that super. Oh, that could be an episode. The Man Who Killed Don Quixote versus Man of La Mancha.
Yeah, and it's like I'd love to go over the Python films. It's like there's so much of his work that I think is yet to be enjoyed by the world for years to come. And this is a Dean and David double feature picture show public announcement that we love and appreciate Terry Gilliam.
That man needs to make more movies.
Yes.
By far. But we have to decide now which is better. So let's get the whole critical response and the financial responses out of the way from these films. So
yeah. All the mumbo jumbo, all the red tape,
all that stuff. So we have Time Bandits, released 1981. David, you want to guess how much movie this made, or how much money this movie made?
Yeah, no offense, but unsurprisingly, really, I do think both of these movies were expensive. That I just get the feeling that even though they were probably doing what was on par with what was contemporary for the time, it's still pushed to a point where he uses every bit of special effect to make his movies as imaginative as possible.
He uses every bit of his money to do it.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to guess that for 1981, we just did a couple of modern movies, so I don't know if I'm going to get this quite right. I'm going to guess over under.
Oh, yeah, we'll give always over under.
Always over under. We're going to go
always over
10 million. Under 15 million, but I know I'm wrong.
You know how wrong you are?
Very wrong.
Estimated Time Bandits cost $5 million.
Really? Oh, okay. That is not. I thought I was going to be
this
way under.
movie estimated $5 million. The biggest thing here was the child actor was completely unknown. He was brought in like basically on accident.
Yeah.
The Time Bandits were, they were not getting a lot of work in anything else. They were, they're all little people. Back then there was not a lot of roles they could be in. So they all worked relatively cheap, and all the big cameos, Sean Connery, all the Pythons, Shelley Duvall, so on and so on. They all worked at rate or next to nothing because they wanted to work with Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
And a lot of the negotiating power was like with Sean Connery. And when Sean Connery is in your movie and he's like, I'll do this basically for free, you get a lot of sway when you're talking to other actors.
No, definitely.
Yeah. Which is kind of interesting because this is what you get to see when you have really solid because you have solid actors across the board. I know we talk a lot of like shit on the actor who played Kevin, the kid in the movie, but he does a fine job.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's just like the taste kind of thing.
For the final product, it's actually really good child acting work. But, it's just one of those things where when we put it under a magnifying glass, we pick it apart. But, all in all, he does a really good job.
Yeah. And how much did this movie make? It made $42 million worldwide on its release in 81. Pretty damn good. It made way over its money.
Yeah.
And this is only his third feature film. Time Bandits was Terry Gilliam's third feature film.
And then you got to go out and make those checks, dude.
Exactly.
And the career alive.
It's true. It's real true. And then after that, we have our second film, 12 Monkeys, which we might not have talked as much about, but it's a damn fine movie. How much do you think 12 Monkeys cost?
again, I think it was going to be expensive,
Mm-hmm.
but I could be wrong. I think I can see why Time Bandits was cheap at this point, because when I really think about it, a lot of practical stuff was being done, and then you could have done a lot of the stuff on sets on a lot versus location,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably cheaper. Not only that, but probably at a cheap soundstage, because it does, no offense, but did seem like some stuff was done at a cheap soundstage. Uh,
Yeah. All the
but
Fortress of Evil stuff was,
yeah, the
yeah.
Fortress of Evil, even the final battle, I think could have been done on that kind of set. But the 12 Monkeys was on location. It was in elaborate locations. Elaborate production design had to be done. There was a lot put into the production of this movie. I think I'm gonna have to go over 10 million. No, I just said that. I'll go a different number. I'm gonna say over 14, under 18. I'm
A
shooting
real small window.
real small window, but I feel like I'm feeling either confident or not confident at all. I have no clue. I'm kind of shooting in the dark.
Double the budget, man. This movie cost estimated $30 million to make. It
I
made
mean,
it.
when you're making 8 times the budget on a kids movie, you may as well get greenlit for something like that.
It's true, and he made plenty of money on this. This movie made 170 million worldwide. This movie brought in buku
Yeah,
bucks.
it's pretty damn good, and also very deserved.
Pretty, really deserved. This movie made a lot of money, and it really deserved it. This is a fine film. Now the critical responses on IMDb, which is where I get a lot of the critical responses from these movies, just because they're on so long. There's a bunch of reviews, and it's a pretty easy rating system. IMDb Time Bandits holds a 7.0 out of 10, and 12 Monkeys holds an 8.0 out of 10. Critics and viewers seem to enjoy 12 Monkeys a little bit more than Time Bandits on average.
Yeah, but they're still being real stiflers about those scores. I mean, to me, I think Time Bandits gets at least a 9. Like I said, I don't really like the rating things, but I think it's a really decent movie after thinking about it again. And
So 9 out of 10 on Time Bandits?
yeah, because
Is
it's
that
like,
is that category as kid movie or category as like movie?
yeah, I guess categorized as like a kid movie, but even as like a movie itself, it's still pretty fun. Like I don't have any, I don't think I can find really anything aside from the Kevin stuff we were talking about to talk ill about it. Um, and while I mean, really, when you think about it, the stuff he had to say was like kind of a major thing. At the end of the day, I'm not sitting here going like, it's a wash, dude. It's a good movie.
It's
Uh,
true.
y-
It's such a good solid film like across the board. Even
yeah,
like the
because
stuff that's weird and bad in it is a little
I'm just thinking
it doesn't detract.
7.0 is like that's feels like an average score to me, and that's not an average movie. I mean, don't get me wrong, but after the discussion we had, it's not average. It's a well above average movie.
Mm.
And on the alternate end with 8.0 for 12 Monkeys, I kind of get that, but at the same time, with it being such like a prolific story, as far as what people now reference it as, and even that specific scene, at the end when he's shot and then he has to look at his child self. That's a pretty famous scene. So I mean,
That the
personally,
performances in 12 Monkeys too.
yeah,
Like
I
we
still go
harp on
back to the
those.
whole like I still feel like that's a little low for what this actually is.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't give
So
them ratings ultimately. And my whole thing was that these two really good movies by a really great director, so you should definitely go check them out. But I am interested to see what we come up with as which one we think is better.
that's true because I'm in the same camp. Absolutely seek both these films out. They're both fantastic, but if you only have time for one, we can only give you one. So, David, you came into these movies completely blind. You're not like me. I'm tainted with like nostalgia and with repeat viewings on these. You came into these movies completely blind. Which do you think you would recommend to the average, Joe America to watch?
So this is interesting because I feel like I've had my decision set from about where we went on break, right? I kind of figured it out right then after all we had talked about. And going back on it now, I can kind of see how my decision is Time Bandits. That's the one I choose. And to justify why is I would have chosen 12 Monkeys because I feel like that's the movie that people would view today and get into more. They would be more interested in it because of the plot and the stars and the action of the movie. And then like, this is what people would classify as a mind fuck, of a plot
Yeah.
twist. Um,
It's the movie that's like really about like messing with your perceptions,
yeah,
and it does it very well.
the ending is on par with the spinning top at the end of Inception. I mean, it's really one of those movies that makes you at the end of it go, whoa, Um, but I think the discussion we had about kids movies and how we only really get quality kids movies out of like Pixar anymore. Time Bandits is one of those movies you need to go have your kid watch because I think it's a movie where instead of just sitting a kid in front of it and having them get tuned out for an hour and a half, the kid can sit in front of it and be engaged by it and really have their imagination challenged. And I don't mean to get all like navel gazy and criticize, parents nowadays, but I do think there's a level to which that's being lost on this generation with all of like the technology, and you're just sat in front of an iPad and you just like plug away on apps and TikTok and YouTube all day. I think there's a level to which imagination and creativity needs to be harbored and nurtured in kids before it's kind of lost on a generation. I think there's a level to which, like with any generation, it'll be found again by a future generation, but I don't want it to go away for a while. I want kids to continue to find that whimsy that this movie provides Kevin, because that's the way we grew up, and I think that's a special feeling that I don't think I'd be able to live without.
It's really weird because like I'm surprised that Time Bandits doesn't have more of like a nostalgia like revitalization, because I've talked to people about this movie before. I've mentioned it, and most people have either A, never seen it, B, never heard of it, or C, they have they look at me like I'm a crazy person when I talk about it and say it's one of my favorite movies from when I was like a little kid. And like it's really interesting because like I think it's apparent at this point. I'm gonna Time Bandits is where I fall as well.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, 12 Monkeys is a fantastic movie. Highly recommend it. But like Time Bandits is just so different that I think you really should watch it, because it's one of those movies where you are gonna watch it, and if you watch it with like your kid or whatever, kids are tough. And this movie is weird, and there's some really weird stuff in it. And there might be like some stuff that's like, okay, that's kind of weird that there's skull like people chasing around the Time Bandits in like the Cavern of Evil, but it's like it's so there's so much imagination, there's so much like fantasy and whimsy and all the weird and crazy stuff like a kid would come up with. That's what this movie is. This is like if a kid was a very good director and made a movie.
It's kind of weird. I just thought about this, but kind of going back to that whole like kids and technology thing, do you feel like that kids nowadays don't even really get bored like Kevin do?
Oh, like because of like constant like stimulus
Yeah,
from
like
like
they have so
immediate.
much they can do that there's no time for that boredom in which you could just be bored, and then creativity takes you by the hand and occupies your time.
That's an interesting observation. We've now gone on to the parenting tangent of this movie
Is
of this podcast. So
is boredom obsolete?
it might be. Well, okay, like traditional boredom.
Oh my god.
Like let's be real. So when you were young, in the before times long ago, like when you got like when you got bored, it was because you couldn't go hang out with your friends. Like all your cartoons that were on weren't on, because guys, back in the day there wasn't streaming services, so you couldn't just watch cartoons and your shows like on demand. Because I grew up like pre-YouTube. Like I was a kid like before YouTube. I was a kid before Netflix. I was,
Yeah.
like I
I
I
still
remember
remember
a
like
world where the internet was dial-up.
yeah, I still remember back in 2006 when YouTube was first starting to be like a pillar website.
Yeah.
but was still like its very, prehistoric iteration. Like people
Oh,
would
back when
post
it was
full
the
episodes of Invader Sim, and that's how my sister watched YouTube. That was it. There wasn't really like YouTube creators yet.
oh god, I remember when it was still the Numa Numa guy and like the dog on the skateboard.
Yeah,
Like that like, ancient YouTube.
yeah.
The long that ancient
Chocolate
YouTube is
rain.
going to be a class in like a college someday where they study like the evolution of the internet and it's going to specialize in ancient YouTube.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think there is a level to which we all look at that stuff with like a historical lens now, because it
Mhm.
is like, that was like 15 years ago. But it's going to be interesting when scholars finally start to look at that academically. They kind of can, because like memetics is already something that we can analyze, especially with like very, within the past year or two internet. And generally how new media affected the media landscape and all that. But man, the times are changing.
That's true.
The times are changing. But
Indeed.
sit down with your kid and watch this movie that is from if not a, I wouldn't say a better time, but at least a time when you could feel something that's such a human thing, to be bored and then be like, well, I guess I have to occupy, I have to make my own time happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Time Bandits is a good movie. Thanks, Dad, for making me watch that.
I think that's a really good place to end this episode. I feel really good about the conclusion we've made about this.
Yeah. All right. I guess this is where we wrap up this very long episode.
Yeah. Well,
What do we got next week, Mr. David?
good question. I think next week we are going to be doing Yes, God, Yes and Juno. I've been very excited about Yes, God, Yes, so I'm super excited to dive into this. You know, like we kind of had a coming of age story this week, and I think there's a really special group of films that have come out of this like weird, it isn't really a boom because it's happened over the last few years, but every year there's been like this really good woman centric coming of age movie that's come out. And I
Yeah.
feel like this is that one, even though there's not a whole lot of movies coming out. Thankfully there's been one that's come out, because this has been like a little slice of cake that I get to go through every year.
It's going to be interesting. We get to see the dawn of like this genre with Juno, and we get to see like what's that genre's turned into with Yes God Yes.
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited.
Yeah.
This one's going into the blind for both of us, so
It's going to be good. But that's it for this week. It's been a wonderful episode, and I'm glad you could come along with us. Dean, tell them where they can find us. Tell them where they can find more of us.
well, you can find more of us on our YouTube channel. That is David
In the Frame.
in the frame. Swear I'm gonna make you say it every time because you run our YouTube channel. The social media, on the other hand, that's where I come in with my lovely girlfriend who runs it for me. That is going to be on Instagram, the double feature _podcast. You can follow us there. We post movie stuff all the time. We post our episodes all the time. And you can also find us here wherever you're listening. That's probably either on Spotify or Anchor.fm, which is our sponsor. Please click the link in the description so we can get paid. I'm really poor and David needs to pay for his Jordans. And
I have people knocking at my door. Please, God help me.
we're really poor. Help us. And then other than that, you can also find us where most podcasts are found. Google Podcasts, so on and so forth. So yeah. That's about it. David?
Yeah. Not much else we can say. Dean, it's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to see you next week.
See you next week, buddy.
All right, see ya.
Peace.